Good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the South Haven City Council. It's Monday, October the 18th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The invocation this evening will be given by the Pastor Travis Wilson of Peace Lutheran Church. Good evening, Travis.
Good evening. Thank you. Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for this night. We give you thanks for the beauty of the sunset that we just experienced and the beauty of this city that we call home. We ask your blessings upon our meeting tonight, upon all those who have gathered here, all those who are online with us as well. We pray for the agenda that's before us. We pray your blessings over that. Be with all those who will speak, be with all those who will listen, and be with all those who will act. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Travis, as always. All right, if you now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Megan.
Jeff Arnold.
Here.
Chris Campbell.
Here.
Joe Reeser.
Here.
Steve Schlack.
Here.
George Sleeper.
Here.
Letitia Wilkins.
Here.
Scott Smith.
Here. That takes us to the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is approved. That takes us, next we're going to receive an update on the narcotics enforcement from our Michigan State Police Representative Sergeant Evan Hauger, if I got it right.
Evan Hauger?
Yes.
Come on up.
Good evening.
Hey, actually, you're gonna get two of us tonight.
Tag
My
team.
name is Tim Blacksford. I'm a lieutenant with the Michigan State Police Southwest Enforcement Team. And Evan is the sergeant that runs a squad that covers this area. So we have, Southwest Enforcement Team has 4 offices. We're at the west office, which our office is out of Benton Harbor, but we cover Van Buren, Cass, and Berrien counties. We're made up of a good selection of MSP, Berrien County personnel from the Sheriff's Department, South Haven PD personnel, and Covert Township. And am I forgetting anybody there? Yeah, that's just our team. We're the only concept team in the state that covers an entire MSP district. So that's why we have 4 offices. We cover all 9 counties in the southwest corridor, which works out really well because there's a great, if you know how the drug trade works in this area, drugs generally come from outside of Michigan. When they land in our area, it's Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, or Benton Harbor generally, and then they flow out from those cities kind of into the smaller towns and outlying areas. So having 9 counties represented, and those counties all generally have a big drug landing point, and then contributing agencies like South Haven PD and Berrien County, Michigan State Police. The information flow is amazing. We don't hit those jurisdictional walls that a lot of task force entities might hit because we're all one big family. We're working in the same offices. We have regular meetings. We call them deconfliction meetings. And it gives you a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak, because that's what, bottom line is are you getting a value for what you're putting into it? So I went back 4 years and looked up some statistics as to what SWET's been doing for you. This is not all 9 counties. This is what I call the greater South Haven area, because when you think of South Haven, we think of the city, township, Covert Township, Geneva, and all the way out like Lakota, Grand Junction, Bloomingdale area, all kind of focuses in and out around here. So for 2 of those 4 years, we had 2 South Haven officers on the team, and then we had 1 South Haven officer on the team. But we still did, during that time frame, those officers did 153 separate investigations, which is quite a lot of work. 93 of those were in this area. That's not including the work that the other detectives you're getting for being a contributor to SWET, because there's 9 detectives. You're getting 8 more bodies that are focusing on this area. So they actually did a total of 193 investigations, and 73, this is what the other detectives did. They did 73 just in and around this area. And if you bump it up, including all the townships touching, that number goes up even higher to 89. During that time frame, they arrested 123 people, and it was 239 counts of felony charges. So if you think about the time and energy they're putting into these investigations, that's a phenomenal amount of work, and then the output. And then, Evan, did you want to talk about the federal stuff, or do you want me to do that?
No, I can do that.
Okay. And that's who I forgot to mention, our federal partners.
Yes, I was actually going to talk a little bit about that as well. Before I get to that, one of the biggest benefits that SWET enjoys is South Haven has been a contributing member for so long. When we need something on the fly from good roll patrol people like Sergeant Hathaway in the back, who's been on SWET, we know that we can call the chief, say, we need somebody now. And this happened as recently as Thursday. We had a great plan in place. Unfortunately, our plan didn't go, our bad guy didn't do what we wanted him to do, and he took a turn that we didn't expect, and he started headed right for South Haven. So Lieutenant Blanksford called chief, said, I need some police cars to stop a car. We're following it right now. We need it stopped because we don't have police lights in our cars. And South Haven PD, I believe it was Sergeant Griffith and Wildy, made the traffic stop on the freeway at the 18. Kinezewski. All people who have been on SWET, and they knew exactly what to do. They didn't have to ask us 100 questions and potentially delay missing the guy because they've been in our position before. And you can't put a value on that, but it just worked out so well because they got our suspect in custody with meth for delivery in his pocket. We seized more evidence within the vehicle. Then we executed 2 search warrants, got a half pound of meth at his stash house, and more evidence at his house here in Geneva Township. So that's something that we have newer people that come on board, and if there's not a rich history with their department of other people before them, their predecessors, it's really hard to bring them up to speed. And it is much faster when contributing partners like South Haven put someone on the team because these people have been used as our uniform personnel for so many years. So as far as the federal stuff, what's great is in the last 5 years, the DEA has put an agent within our office. What that does is opens up a lot more resources, both in the investigative side. So if we need special equipment, if we need money, if we need equipment for training or for actual physical surveillance, they have a much bigger piggy bank to speak, and they can help us out with that a lot. Also, when we have a case like the one I described on Thursday where the drugs are above a certain threshold, we can actually seek federal prosecution. So even though we lodged in Van Buren County on Thursday, we're already starting the initiation process for the federal adoption of that case. What that means is not only does the person then go to a federal prison at more or less a federal expense, but it also involves more co-conspirators and more evidence is gained through co-conspirator testimony to further other cases in the future. In the last few years, we've been a part of 5 what are called Title III cases. It's basically a federal wiretap, not easy to get, a very long process. Usually it takes a whole year to get all the paperwork in order to get it approved if it gets approved. But what that does is it brings in partners with the FBI and the DEA for a more long-term investigation, typically at least a year long, sometimes 3. And when it's all said and done, we have many more people that are indicted and many more pounds and pounds of drugs, and I mean that literally pounds and pounds of meth and cocaine that get seized because of the resources that come with those cases. I don't know of any other team in the western half of Michigan that's been a part of 5 Title III cases like SWET has, and all 5 of those originated in SWET from the West office in conjunction with some of our Van Buren partners and our Kalamazoo partners as well.
Well, and those, if I could just add,
Yeah.
those are international investigations. Those are where your one officer is now part of a team where every single one of those, I'm pretty sure we indicted people in Mexico, right where the drugs were coming from. So that South Haven PD officer is now directly affecting the international drug trade, and that's hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars of illegal drugs and the lives that they're saving from stopping that stuff coming into the U.S. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit about how far-reaching those investigations are.
Thanks, Tim. Also, you should know that SWET has a grant that allows for the recovery of drug investigation overtime. So it's called HIDTA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It's a federal grant. So when overtime is incurred from our active investigations, we could submit paperwork to get that overtime reimbursed through the HIDTA grant. SWET, we pay for the vehicle fuel, so we give a fuel card to the South Haven officers that are on our team so that we cover all their fuel costs. South Haven is kind enough to provide the vehicle itself. And SWET also pays for all the training associated with everything. When we get a new detective, typically there's about 3 to 5 weeks of training they have to receive to be not only up to speed and be proficient at their job, but to be safe with their job and safe as a teammate as well. So it's raid entry training, undercover investigations training, clan lab, meth lab training, to be able to just do the functions of our narcotics officer. So.
See, locally, we've had a number of larger investigations. As you guys all know, we focus mostly on meth, heroin, and crack cocaine investigations. We are currently, with the detectives we have assigned, just in the South Haven area, we're working towards another Title III case on a pound-level meth dealer that's sending meth directly into your area. We just finished up a 6-month investigation on a guy on Thursday where that investigation netted over a pound of meth. And that is, just to give you a perspective on how much meth that is, a meth dose is half a gram. There's 28.7 grams in an ounce, 16 ounces in a pound. And we're taking pounds, so every time we seize even a gram, we took 2 doses of meth off the street, and hopefully somebody didn't try it for the first time because it wasn't there for them. State level investigations, we have just so many going to count, and you can't. I know we live in South Haven. I live in South Haven. I'm a resident of the township. I love this area. Until I started doing this job, I didn't see what's going on the other side, the drug world side, and it's very eye-opening to me when I ran the stats. I knew we had done a lot of good work in the area, but 123 felony drug arrests, and those are drug dealers, not just the users. So it's you get a lot out of contributing to the enforcement team. So.
The other benefit is when a officer from South Haven rotates out of SWET after their 3 to 5, whatever their commitment level determines to be, when they rotate out and they're back on the road, they now have a world of experience that they can teach other officers, and if they promote, they can officially teach them, but if they're an FTO, they can teach them that way as well, with obtaining search warrants, with having contacts not just in this county but in the neighboring counties as well, and that just makes their job so much easier going forward. They know. As a police officer, you don't have to know the answer. You just have to know someone who does. That's 90% of our job is contacting someone who knows the answer, and that's what they get when they join SWET.
Good.
Any questions for us that anybody would have?
I will say thank you very much for the work you do, for keeping drugs out of our town and these bad people off the streets. So I'm grateful every day for the work you do. This is on an upcoming ballot, so by voting, supporting this, we will continue to support these efforts. So I think we're looking for that affirmation. So you definitely showed the value. So any other questions, or just thank you. Work well done, so we appreciate it. Thanks for the update. All right. And you gentlemen are free to sneak out if you want. If you'd like to have dinner or have an evening, you are welcome to sneak out. I promise. You're allowed, or any time. Next, we have the consent agenda items A through F.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through F.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Arnold,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Reeser,
Yes.
Schlack,
Yes.
Sleeper,
Yes.
Wilkins,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. That takes us to old business, and City Council will be asked to take the following actions regarding the proposed Overton development. We have several sub-items here. Gentlemen, thank you again. Appreciate it. The plan is that there's three that are really just discussion items, so you'll hear some presentations. We will have an opportunity for public comment on D and E, which there will be actually action that is taken. So that'll keep us cruising along here. So we start with a discussion of the proposed income and unit type tables with Mr. Jeff Head of the Habitat Company. So I know Jeff's out here ready to chat with us today. So, and I don't know if Kate, if you want to queue up tables and slides, and we can kind of talk about where we are, where I appreciate the kind of the latest rendition and those market rate. I like all that
Mayor
good stuff.
Smith, council members, thanks for having me back. I wanted to come back knowing that we have the redevelopment agreement on the agenda later, really to sort of recap where we are in the process. We're not going through the site plan and so forth, but I just want to kind of recap where we are, how we got here. And we started with the city's RFP, with the focus on the missing middle, on a broad range of affordable opportunities for people who've been priced out of the local market. We started with a rough plan. We started with some initial tables to try and sort of present, to get feedback about what are the people who live in South Haven want to see out of this development. We've had a variety of updates to this. Probably every time we've gotten together, we've made some adjustments. And that's because we continue to hear comments from the residents and from the council through Kate and Griffin. I don't want to go through the details of all of this as much as to say that, this is our effort to reach the missing middle with the broad range of incomes from that allows minimum wage workers up to teachers, firefighters, new workers at the engineering firms, the folks that you spoke specifically about, Mayor, at our last meeting. And we wanted to find a way to include all of that mix into the development. One of the things that I've said in our Zoom meetings and in our meeting back in June is that we would partner with a for-sale developer. I'm very pleased that Dwelling Place is here to talk about that program. I wanted to remind folks that this is something that we had committed to, and we're making good on that commitment. We've had a couple of meetings with Kate and Griffin with Dwelling Place, and I think that they feel very good about the proposal and the concept that Dwelling Place brings. And what it does, just looking across the range of incomes and targets, is it broadens the opportunity again without diminishing the overall program. It creates homeownership opportunities that the residents and council members have asked about, and I think it's a very exciting program. And I just wanted to be here with it up on the board, kind of both to talk about the range of units and the size of the development. We think that this is consistent with what the RFP was. We think it's consistent with the original proposals that we made, and that it's consistent with the discussions that we've had going along over the last 12 months or so. And so I don't have more to say about it than that, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
I'll kick it off. So, one, I appreciate that we've now in this first phase are showing the ability to get rental in that market rate group.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. I think Just so, kind of a frame of reference, as we looked at that 0 up to 40%, that we're talking, that's up to like 10 and a half bucks an hour roughly, 10.42, I think, per the table. Minimum wage is, what is it right now, $9.65, I think, $9.65 an hour. So there are, I mean, just as we're understanding in that group, and I know, Steve, I don't know if you want to throw this question out at some point in time. You were wondering about those lower ranges. We talked about vouchers and whatnot, whether or not this is the time, but just to, how,
Yeah, at one point I was told that, that the lower income units would be selected for or reserved for handicap, veterans, or senior citizens. I think Mr. Kilpatrick told us that at one point.
I think that they're open to whoever qualifies. We don't, under fair housing, we can't, set aside for any specific group. We can create priorities for those folks. And under our leasing plan that we present to the state, but it's not specifically reserved. Ryan, I don't know if you have any clarification. Yeah, okay. You're right. Okay, I understand the question. So one of the things that we've discussed is the potential to use housing, project-based housing vouchers along with the units, and they would go along with the under 40% units. That's not something that we're fully committed to doing at this point. I think that from my perspective, as developer and owner, that would be a positive way to expand that realm of affordability to people who, may be unable to work and have very minimal income, and the voucher would help them pay their rent. Under the program that I have outlined here, all of the rent is paid through income as opposed to a voucher or any other kind of a subsidy to the tenant. Now, again, we've talked to MSHDA. There is a program that targets the folks that you described, and it does basically, as Ryan said, disabled seniors and veterans. Thank you. And so I think that we would look to continue the conversation with staff and others about whether to proceed with those voucher applications. It's not something that we automatically get because we have the units at that income level. It's a program that MSHDA has. We'd have to apply. They would have to say yes.
okay. Anybody else have some questions? Otherwise, I'll keep jumping in. So the largest group, that 40 to 60, so that's basically anywhere from about $21,000 a year to about $32,000 a year. And then we have some of the higher units. And I guess I might have you share the stage for a minute with Ryan. One of our stated goals, we many times get asked the question, what's the goal? What's the goal? Our goal, the city council established, specifically calls out housing. One of the goals was to focus on the planning and execution of missing middle and workforce housing options throughout the city. So just, I guess, Ryan, could you just, you're sitting there, sorry, and you're better explaining this than anybody I know. Does this get at it? Better, what else? What are we missing here? Because we're relying on you as our expert. How are we doing?
Yeah. No, I think that actually having this table is super helpful because you got to do a little bit of math, but when you combine the rental rates for the 60 to 80% AMI through to the right, the market rate plus the for sale 80 to 100% AMI and 100 to 120% AMI. Combine all those things together, you get a third of your total project is targeting those folks who are earning 80 to 120% AMI. So that is the group of folks that we had been talking about at previous meetings saying, well, gosh, we're not quite hitting those folks. Now a third of the overall project is hitting that segment. But in addition to that, you're also seeing almost half, 47% of the overall units, are targeting households that, frankly, otherwise are getting priced out of the market rate, and we don't have enough affordable housing in the market for those folks. So that's the other component of kind of that missing middle that we don't normally have. And then just a little bit over 20% of the overall unit mix is similar to some of the affordable units you already have in the community, but is providing that additional option that we heard so much from the neighboring community during the community engagement sessions. We heard from a lot of folks during those sessions that they were concerned this project wasn't going to be affordable enough, that they felt like if there was going to be new development in the neighborhood, they wanted to make sure that their friends or family members who already live in South Haven and are cost overburdened would be able to move in. So I think they've done a nice job of kind of striking that balance between hitting the target market that you've asked for specifically over the last couple of meetings, while still also ensuring that the neighborhood feedback that we've received over the last several months is also being honored.
And what about the ability to kind of continue to move? I mean, just can you talk for a second about, sometimes people, they start making money, and then all of a sudden I don't qualify anymore, so now I'm still in this boat where I'm not making enough I can't afford the market rate, but I'm stuck. So again, we're in the cycle. We can't get out of the cycle. How does this help with the cycle?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times people will make different choices about where they want to live based on a number of factors. And so you may have people who move in and out every few years because they want to live in a different part of town, or they got married, or they had kids, or their kids moved out. But we also want to create opportunities for people to remain in place, right? And so if they get a raise or they get a promotion, we want them to be able to stay where they live currently if they want to stay there. We don't want them to suddenly no longer qualify because they earn too much money. And so I think that's the other benefit of the way that they've proposed the unit mix, is even after households are earning more than 60% AMI and more than 80% AMI, there are still units available on this property that can accommodate folks who are earning in the $60,000 to $75,000 range if they're single adults, or the $75,000 to $85,000 range, maybe even up to $90,000 if it's a family of four. So you have the ability to go from potentially a minimum wage worker all the way up to a family of four that's earning $90,000 a year, and there are accommodations for every one of those families within the project.
Okay, perfect. Which was,
A little bit to that.
yep.
I think Ryan summarized it really well, how we approach this, and there were a lot of discussions with Ryan along the way. I think the only thing that I would add is we really see it as a continuum, for whether it's for individuals or for the community, but having that entry-level opportunity going all the way up to a homeownership opportunity, and a way for people to grow within their families and be able to move along an economic ladder, so to speak, and having that homeownership opportunity that Dwelling Place can talk a little bit about when we're done here.
Sounds good. No, and again, we hear over and over and again, we don't have housing options. We have numerous businesses that do not have a place for the people to work. I've got a lot of people coming into town, from out of town. We need to have opportunities for people to live in this town, work in this town, stay in this town. And if you start here, you'll better chance you'll stay here. Just saying. So anything else for this fine gentleman before we go on to the next discussion item? Mr. Reeser.
I'm glad Ryan and both of you explained this, and it seems good. My one question is, so much of this is our best estimate on what the community needs and who's going to live where. We don't know until we build the apartments how much in demand that'll be for each of those categories. So I guess my bottom line question is this. Let's say the apartments sell out overnight,
Yep.
but one category sells much faster than another. Can you, in the phase 2 of the apartments, make adjustments? And then you're not going to like this part of the question. If the apartments sold just okay, rented out, but we started to do the second phase, which is the for sale homes, and let's say they sold out overnight. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you make your money on building, managing the apartments. We may even talk about a third party for the for sale homes, But let's say there's a real demand for those homes. Could you cut back? Would you be willing to? Could we, within all of our contracts, I've read this stuff and reread it, could we even make any adjustments to more or less apartments as we went forward? Probably less, if homes really sold well.
I think that the way I would approach the question is kind of where you started. Where is the demand? I would expect the demand's going to be high in all of these areas because of the lack of product in the community. I mean, there's the demand for apartments, affordable apartments, wherever we build them, is very high. The occupancy is very high. The tenure tends to be long. So I would expect that you'll see high demand in all of these areas, and that what you'll find is that the 140 plus minus units that are developed under this plan will scratch the surface of the need for the larger community.
Which, again, we've said this is the one project. This is the beginning. There are other sites being discussed. There's other opportunity. This is the start. So, and it's the first attempt at housing that's been, one ever attempted straight on by the city, or, you know, we've had housing commission projects, but that's been, how many years ago now? 30, 40, been a while. So,
Quite some time.
okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll get on to that.
Mayor, I'll have a follow-up question, because I've had some people ask me, why do we not have any, in the first rental phase, why do we not have any units in the 60 to 80% category versus, and if you go down to rental phase 2, we have some in the 60 to 80, but we don't have any in the market? If Ryan could come up and kind of explain why you don't have 2 of those units in each of those, or units in each of those categories for each rental phase. I think he had some kind of restrictions from the MSHDA LIHTC program. Ryan, can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, I'll do my best, and Jeff, you correct me if I get any of this wrong. Sometimes. So for a couple of years under the LIHTC program, both through MSHDA and through the federal government, because the tax credits are first allocated from the federal government to the state, and then the state issues the rules as to which projects actually get an award. The process has allowed for income averaging. And so for many years before this, the federal government standard was 60% area median income was kind of the maximum threshold at which they could fund tax credits. And then they began to allow for income averaging, which meant that if you had some 40% AMI units, you could have some 80% AMI units. And that gave you a better blend. Just earlier this year, after we brought Habitat on as kind of the preferred developer and began working through site plans, the IRS changed its guidelines as to how it would review when a project was out of compliance with that income averaging provision. And so what happened was the IRS provided guidelines that made investors extraordinarily wary of investing in any project that used that income averaging. Because if for one day the project fell out of compliance, meaning if you had a 40% AMI renter who decided, I'm going to move out and I'm going to go live with my sister, that vacancy could trigger non-compliance for a day or two or a week or two while they clean the apartment and they move the next tenant in. And that non-compliance can trigger a whole slew of IRS rebuttals, which means the project could fall out of compliance and lose its tax credit allocation, which means the investors don't want to be invested in that deal. It's too risky. They want to back away from it. So we understand that the IRS clearly understands the mistake of the current guidelines, and we're expecting revisions to those guidelines hopefully in the next couple of months. There are developers all over the country who are pulling their hair out because they can't do income averaging anymore, because tax credit investors are too worried about the ramifications of the income averaging provisions. So we expect that hopefully by the time this project gets submitted in the spring, we have revised guidelines. But for now, the project is proposed using the current guidelines, assuming we're probably not going to be able to income average, which means we can't provide units in that 60 to 80% range. But we're all going to really cross our fingers and hope that by phase 2, all of those things have been figured out, and we'll be able to transition the market rate units into the 60 to 80% AMI. And so you see that flip-flop. Now, the reason that I believe, and Jeff, this is where you can definitely correct me. And I should also say, just for a note, we've got two other experts in terms of LIHTC credit. Chris Bennett with Dwelling Place does this all the time. So if I get anything wrong, I'll ask Chris to come up and correct me in a minute. When you include market rate units in a tax credit investment deal, it hurts the financial performance of the project. Because typically with a tax credit investment deal, your equity is coming from those tax credit investors. And with market rate units, you've got to find other equity. And that equity tends to be more expensive for these kinds of projects. So having market rate units in a project that is primarily tax credit is a worse deal for the developer because the equity comes in a different way. So the phase 2 will probably be a better phase for the development group because they can bring in more of that tax credit equity. All of that assumes that we've got the updated IRS guidelines. And it's still possible that we'll have updated guidelines before they actually submit for their tax credit allocation later this winter, early spring. Please.
One other clarification to that, and Ryan's right how he described it. I think it comes out to be a fairly elegant solution, though, as well, in terms of the range of incomes. I think one of the things that we talked a lot with Kate and Griffin and Ryan as well about is this goal of having the market rate units. And so I don't want to try to make you all tax credit experts, but another regulation is that you're not allowed to, or it's at least very difficult to combine market rate units and those 60 to 80% units in the same transaction. And so we felt like, one, we don't know what's happening with the 60 to 80% units under the guidelines right now. Let's just say this is the place where we're gonna put those market rate units in now. And that gives the council some assurance that they're there. It gives us some opportunity to see how they perform. And it gives the IRS some time to sort their stuff out, as Ryan described. So I think that it broadens the range, which is really, kind of a core goal that we've been working through for really the whole time since we were recommended.
Yeah, I appreciate it. For me, that's an essential component that was fixed, so I appreciate that.
And we heard that loud and clear.
Mm-hmm. So this was more to have the kind of an interaction with council to make sure that these are the AMI levels, or at least the range of levels that you're looking to have. Now, if everything is approved by the city council, Habitat would be going through the planning and zoning process because, as we know, we have a concept plan, but we do not have planning and zoning approvals. So these numbers are preliminary based on what's going to happen at those other approval levels. And the idea is, in the development agreement, Habitat would come back after seeking those approvals, and then prior to making their application with MSHDA, get the council's blessing on their final AMI income distribution based on the number of units they've been approved for.
And there may be some, minor adjustments. I think it'll look similar to what you see now. There's a lot of math included, not just the unit mix math, but the dollar mix math as well. And different units cause different stresses in the overall budget. But this, I just wanted to kind of go on record that this is, broadly speaking, what we think that we heard from you as a council, from the community at large, and the basic direction that we'd be going with our tax credit application when we put it together, if we're lucky enough to be approved by the Plan Commission.
Sounds good, thank you.
On the chart there, the up to 40% on the income.
Yeah.
Why the need for that?
Why
In other words, I'm going back to my seniors and my veterans and that again.
Yeah.
If we can't have that guarantee, then can we switch the up to 40% up to the 60 and 80% or market value?
No, I mean, for a couple of reasons.
And why?
And I'll run through them. One of the reasons is a basic allocation math. in terms of having an application to MISTA that is sufficiently competitive that we're able to secure the credits. MISTA requires that something around, I think that 15 was kind of the bare minimum number of below 40% units that we were able to include and have a competitive scoring range in our preliminary application. Another reason is that we certainly wouldn't shut out the seniors, the veterans, the disabled. They're absolutely welcome, that we would market to them. And again, I feel like I need a little bit of direction from the council on the vouchers. I've heard sort of through broad commentary, some folks are concerned about the vouchers. Some folks want to see them. I kind of, there's pluses and minuses for Habitat as the owner and manager and having them. It helps in leasing the units. It's a lot of compliance. On the other side, it brings in, it broadens the range of opportunity. But they're just different components to balance. So I sort of look a little bit to you for what would you like to see happen in that range? Are the vouchers something that the council supports? And we don't have to have this conversation live right now, but if we can hear back through you, through Griffin and Kate, I would like, it would be helpful to me to have a little bit of direction, because they're frequently a controversial component of the unit mix. And so I'd like to know what the council would like to see. And so like I said, we're open to them. It would require an application. It would require an approval. And I think as owner on balance, we would like to have them, but I don't want to create a new problem by having them that, is unnecessarily. So I'm interested in the input of everyone on those. And nothing about what we have here and where we are now forecloses having them. But we do need to have the units in that range below 40%. And I think that the other thing that's true is that we heard from the broader community that there's a need for them.
And maybe it would be helpful just to maybe get a little more information as far as what it entails. Are we talking about, is it an all or nothing kind of a situation? You could have some.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to, again, exclude. Remember, 40% gets you beyond minimum wage. So we still have people that might be, working at a shop downtown, working at a restaurant in those lower ranges. I don't want to exclude that by having an all voucher. So anyway, just
and
to
also
make
and also
sure.
part-time people.
Part-time, correct. So we've got.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be all 15. I think that when we were modeling it, I think that we were looking at probably 7 or 8 as kind of the number, so that it would be sort of like roughly half of them.
So, but again, we don't have to finalize that tonight. We can get some information and.
Exactly.
Right, and so this is just to kind of get your feedback for Jeff as he's working on these tables as they go through this. But specifically to Mr. Slock's question, we do have a section in the development agreement, section 210C, where we did kind of itemize these vouchers and how they would be allocated to the fullest extent. Now, the voucher system, as I understand it, at least specifically the 811s, like there is a finite number of them, and an application would have to be their MISTA application would have to ask for them, but they may not get them all. But this section kind of goes to where those would be allocated to their fullest extent, and that would be to, and this is specifically for the up to 40%. This is for disabled individuals participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program or elderly individuals on a fixed income. So, but if there's more questions, we can
And
take.
these numbers are all based off your total unit mix, correct?
The 7 or 8, there's a lot of numbers. I want to make sure that we're talking about the same numbers.
The 144 units.
Yeah,
These percentages are based off that unit total.
Yes.
The percentage number, the bottom line percentage is based on the total number of units. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Look fair, everyone? Makes sense?
Well, I guess I'm ready to just say that, for me anyway, I would be in favor of having some vouchers involved in the 0 to 40%, so.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm fine with that as well.
Thank you for your input, and I really appreciate you allowing me to talk this through tonight. Thank you.
Sounds good. I think it was very helpful. Thanks for coming, sharing. All right, next, we're going to receive a presentation from the Dwelling Place, regarding a potential community land trust concept for the Overton for sale phase. And good evening and welcome. We're all kind of excited to hear about this, so.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. David DeVelder, Community Land Trust Director for Dwelling Place.
And I'm Chris Bennett. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development at Dwelling Place.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe the first slide, or?
We have a,
He's just,
oh, you can go to the next slide.
Finger, or would you? Okay.
There you go.
All right. So Dwelling Place, we've been around for 40 years. We actually just had our 40th anniversary celebration not too long ago. Established in 1980 by a collective of churches and nonprofits in the Hartside neighborhood in Grand Rapids. Our mission, this is on the back of our business cards, this is something every single development process we go through is through the lens of our mission. To improve the lives of people by creating quality affordable housing, providing essential support services, and serving as a catalyst for neighborhood revitalization. So those are three prongs that we view any development that we undertake. It has to meet that criteria, right? Are we improving lives of people both in the development and the surrounding neighborhood? Are there enough support for residents as they move in, or are we providing those services in projects where we do that kind of, the support services roles for homeless and so on? And is there a component that work in partnership with another developer or other agencies in the neighborhood that would promote neighborhood revitalization or stimulate economy growth and so on? So for us, it's not just by the numbers; it has to meet that criteria. And if it's a percentage of growth per year in a strategic plan, I always lean on, is this mission focused or is this, just growth for sake of growth? Because the former is much more important to us than the latter. Right now, we own and manage in about 40 different properties, roughly 1,400 different apartments, and those are all funded primarily through low-income housing tax credits, similar to what you just heard in the previous presentation. We're very familiar with that process. Incidentally, sir, to your point earlier about the market and absorption, part of the application process involves a market study that's ordered through like a third party, and that would actually tell the developer if their proposed unit mix and AMI thresholds and so on would have an absorption rate and all that kind of stuff. And if it's found out that it doesn't, the application would actually have a very hard time getting funded. So it's not quite a simple matter of like thinking. There's a little bit of homework involved, I guess, would be like that's a component that should come up pretty soon. But I'm digressing. I apologize.
One other question with that last point. You say own and manage. So if I understand reading all this, you own the land, but the people own the homes?
So this is rental.
Oh, you're back to, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just giving some background here. We'll go into the details of the CLT. The question essentially is you're asking is yes, but we'll go into the detail on it shortly here. We also own and operate about 100,000 square feet of commercial space in downtown Grand Rapids. We have a community building engagement department. They connect, that's part of that support services I referenced earlier. They connect residents with neighborhood events, different employment opportunities, different, any educational or training opportunities in the area, anything in that effect. Our new CEO, Jeremy DeRue, started just in August of 2021, and we are a member of NeighborWorks, which is a national affiliate made up of different affordable housing nonprofits across the country. We're one of, 5 in Michigan. State of Habitat for Humanity of Michigan is another affiliate, just as another example. So, but we have, we're primarily in Grand Rapids. We have housing in Holland. We have housing in Muskegon Heights, all the way up in Hesperia, which I honestly didn't know too much about until I started here. So it's a bit of a drive. So we're spread out a little bit, and this is one of 14 different counties that are in our service, what we've deemed as our service area through NeighborWorks that we want to be involved in. So very happy to be here tonight. Very happy to be included in part of this And honestly, you can never have anyone better than Ryan Kilpatrick to speak to the ins and outs of all this process. The dude is everywhere. Honestly, yeah, he's all over the place. So I really appreciate having him here tonight, too. So go ahead to the next one.
All right, thanks, Chris. So Community Land Trusts, hopefully by the end of this, we'll be able to help you understand exactly what they are. They are nonprofits, so the Dwelling Place Community Land Trust is a separate nonprofit from Dwelling Place. So it was newly established a couple years ago, but it was being thought of for about 20 years by our former CEO, who just retired. And it is focused on resale restricted housing. So this is income restricted housing. We can go all the way up to 110% of the area median income. And a big point of CLTs is stewardship. So it's not about just selling the home, but it's also about staying engaged with the family and the community that the family is engaged in, just walking alongside of them if any emergencies happen, if anything happens. There's really no such thing as a foreclosure with a CLT. I'll talk about that here in a minute. So Grounded Solutions Network is a national membership organization that it's like a governing body for all the CLTs. This is showing 2 CLTs in Michigan when this slide was done a couple years ago. There's now, I think, 7 in Michigan just in 2 years, so there is a huge growth in CLTs. So one of the land trusts that we're partnered with is in Minneapolis. They put this slide together about CLTs. So just, one of the unique things about land trusts is they really have the ability to increase home ownership, especially in people that, household groups that typically have not been served by home ownership. Either low-income families, people that of different ethnicities, and I can't speak, demographics who are not being served by home ownership. So the CLT really is helping that. The other component is people who are not homeowners typically have very little wealth. So the average median income by a household in a CLT is about $14,000, so significantly more than somebody who's just renting. 58% of land trust homeowners go on to purchase a traditional home after about 5 to 7 years. So that's a huge deal, right? Like, I don't know what the statistics are for renters, but huge difference there. And then most of the purchasers are first-time homeowners headed by women in their late 30s, 50 to 80% AMI. Our land trust goes up further than that, but that tends to be the main income group that is served in land trust. So as far as the, this slide really is just talking about, what is a land trust? So I guess the neat thing about a land trust is it's a permanently affordable home ownership unit. So this is something that's not going away. So the land is in trust by Dwelling Place. The housing unit is sold to the family. If the home resells, the land stays with the land trust, the home is sold to the next homeowner. The ground lease that a family signs when they purchase the home is good for 89 years. It's renewable for another 89 years. So conceivably, if the homeowner stayed in the home, they would, and another family member inherited it, that income restriction, or I guess it's perpetual, the affordability is there for a very long time, regardless of whether it stays in the family or is resold. Housing quality is a priority because these are in a trust for a long time. We want to make sure it's a very well-built home, energy efficient. One of the key components of land trust is displacement. Many people, especially in metropolitan areas and cities, are being displaced out of their rental homes, out of apartments because of rising rents. And housing is getting obviously so expensive that a lot of people can't afford to purchase a home. So a land trust really is essentially lowering the price to an affordable price. In exchange for that, we're sharing the equity on the back end. It's a pay-it-forward program. They're basically gaining anything they pay back on their mortgage, down on their mortgage, plus 25% of the appreciation. The other 75% stays in the home, and thereby allows the next family to purchase at a lower price. So nothing is coming back to Dwelling Place. It's all staying at the property.
Okay, that's the big point. So hypothetically, for round numbers, the house goes up $100,000 in value. The homeowner gets $25,000 of that appreciation, and you get to keep in the home. I'm not complaining, I'm just make sure I understand. You get to keep 75% into that home. So the next person that buys it still gets a home at an affordable price, and the person who did own it at least gets the appreciation, some of it.
And
Plus,
what they put in, for, you know, with their initial sale, if it went up in value, so, yeah. Yeah.
So, because it's appraisal, fee simple appraisal to fee simple appraisal. Whatever that difference is, they get 25% of it from the time they purchased to the time they sold.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one of the nice things about a land trust is it has a board of directors. 1/3 of the board of directors are homeowners, so in the land trust. 1/3 are sponsoring entity board members, in this case from Dwelling Place, because we're the ones that are going to steward this process, helping with families when they go to resell, so we're going to be there, and then 1/3 from the community. So ours is a regional land trust, so that 1/3, the board will take notices from, you know, people from the community, could be from government, could be from, you know, finance industry, real estate industry, and the board would decide who gets appointed. So one of our goals with the land trust is a replicable model that we can get to 100 to 150 units in our land trust so that it's sustainable. So we're pioneering some projects around West Michigan to get this going. We have a large one in Grand Rapids. We have this one that we're thrilled about doing. We also have 50 rental units that we're converting into homeownership in Grand Rapids. So we're well on our way. In this case, in this community, appraised values are projected to be around $220,000. They may be higher than that by the time the project is ready to sell. Land trust sale price $165,000, 75% of the appraised value.
sorry to ask another question, but it's an important one, I think. So someone buys this home, it cannot be a short-term rental. We know that right off the top. But it has to be owner occupied, meaning it can't be a summer home. Is that correct? They have to be there a majority of the time?
They are required to be here at least 6 months of the year.
Say that again?
6 months of the year.
Okay.
It has to be their primary residence, has to have a PRE
So they
on
can
it.
go to Florida for 3 or 4 months, but it still has to be their home.
Correct.
They cannot, can they rent it out those 6 months?
No.
They cannot, okay.
This project would be in partnership with the Van Buren County Land Bank. We have talked to them, and they are optimistic about working with us and desire to work with us. We also would, in addition to the brownfield TIF that we'd be looking for in this project, we also have new market tax credits. Those tax credits can only be used for units that are under 80% area median income. The other units that are non-new markets, we would be going out to for other funding. So one of the cool benefits with home ownership is, in this case, all the home buyers are going through home buyer education through a HUD certified counselor. There's mortgage lending going on in these. So 26 townhouses, those are all going to have mortgages. We have 4 lenders that participate in our program. We'll certainly invite more that want to participate. It could be local lenders here in South Haven.
It really just comes down to understanding the differences in how the mortgaging works, right? Like, once you get people, yeah, you can work with anybody as long as they're.
Yeah, it's just any lender that uses Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac could participate if they desire. And then employers are, have a homeownership product that is available. We found that around the United States, it's a big issue with employers having employees that can afford to live in their community.
It's a huge issue here.
So this is really, this really speaks it all as far as, what land trusts have the ability to do. This is based from Ground Solutions Network based on 40 years of study just comparing conventional homeownership to shared equity homeownership. And so the brown is conventional and the blue is shared equity. Community land trusts are one of the ways that shared equity housing is accomplished. There's deed restricted housing, there's limited equity co-ops, CLTs is one of them, so this is across shared equity housing. 74% of low-income shared equity homeowners maintain homeownership in the first 6 years. In traditional homeownership, less than 50% have continued in homeownership after the first 5 years. So much higher percentage, less foreclosure. 8% in traditional mortgage experience serious delinquency. Shared equity, 1% serious delinquent, 0.46 who have gone into foreclosure. So there's really no such thing as a foreclosure. It's a huge benefit for the community. It is true. Low-income homeowners, moderate-income homeowners, they live on a tight budget, and they're only one emergency away from losing their home. In this case, it's not going to happen. So, and then just comparing monthly payments, $1,800 a month average monthly payment of conventional owners compared to $1,100 for shared equity, and then 13% of the average home ownership in traditional home ownership take out HELOC, home equity loans, 1.4% in shared equity housing. So they're not borrowing against that equity all the time. They're building up their equity, which is leading to a more stable home ownership investment. And then this is just showing all the partners that we're currently working with, our lenders, our home buyer education partners, and then the funders that have helped us start this program, and consultant and legal team. Any questions? Thank you for having us.
It's interesting. I guess just to help, I had just one, how are you getting your pool of applicants? How does it typically look as people are coming to you? Are they coming, gee, I've got income X, Y, Z. Are you marketing these? Hey, if you've got X, Y, Z income, just curious how are you getting your initial pool of applicants?
So a variety of ways. Referral from our education partners, referral from community partners. In this case, in your area, it could be employers, could be the neighborhood. Anybody that hears, hey, I'm looking for a home. Us doing community engagement events within this area, within downtown South Haven, hosting events is really the biggest way. And then, yes, there's always a possibility that homes could be listed on the MLS. It's not our first priority to do that, but it is something that could happen to advertise the opportunity.
And you do addition, I know you do the for sale. Are some of your sites also doing for rent and then for sale so they could start at A and go to B? Or I just was curious how that looks.
Traditionally, it's been like rental, just because that's been our wheelhouse for the entirety of Dwelling Place. But as we plan out different low-income housing tax credit developments in the future, we have considered having some of those be able to be turned over to like a CLT program down the road. David mentioned the rental units that are converting to CLTs right now, and those are former LIHTC developments. There's 10 single-family homes, there's a series of duplexes, and then there's one multifamily building downtown that were the traditional rental that we generally provide, that we've slated as CLT opportunities for either the current resident or a new resident should that unit become available. So,
okay.
But you can mix and match a little bit. Like this is good. This project is a good example of that, where if you're mindful of trying to serve the different types of need, you can come up with a site plan that could accommodate both. And in my mind, that even speaks more towards the type of sustainability we like to see in development opportunities, where you can have that kind of true mix of incomes, mix of housing types, and it just serves for a better outlook sometimes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. So, perfect. Other questions?
I've got a real quick question. First of all, thank you for being here and sharing your information on us. In one of the slides, you talked about new market tax credits, and used with income targeting one half of the units that serve households below 80% of the median income. In Jeff's earlier table, for the for sale units, he had half in the 80 to 100% and half actually 100 to 120%. Is that something that kind of mix wouldn't work for you guys, or is that something that could work?
I think we're talking about brownfield too, I guess, so it just depends. It just depends on what would be available to cover the rest of the gap if it wasn't enough to cover, if that funding model didn't really reach as far as we'd like it to, but it was still what the community need was demonstrating, then we just have to determine what other source would be available to help cover that gap, right, to help make that work out. So, but that's just part of the continued conversation. I mean, it's, as we're planning this out, we just get closer and closer, getting that tighter and tighter, and, the sharper it gets, the better we're able to kind of discern, okay, we have this many units at this range, and then we can work out what that gap looks like, and then we can start talking about, we're talking about just conventional loans, or are we talking about philanthropy, are we talking about grants, or, the reality is all the above, but, we can start tackling that as it goes.
Need it all.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
It's interesting. Any others? My only other question is, where is Hesperia?
Oh, yeah, I know, right? We go past Muskegon for a long time.
Okay, just go that way. Got it. Okay, that's all. No, thank you. North of Muskegon, there you go. All right. Okay, sorry, I'm geographically challenged. Very good.
Nice
Gentlemen,
looking
it's very fascinating, so I appreciate it. I hope everyone tonight start to kind of get a concept of what we're talking about. So thank you for now, and
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
are we game to get one more presentation before we go on? Or do you need a break? You back good for another couple? Okay, let's do one more presentation, we'll take a break. Next, we're going to receive a presentation from Envirologic regarding the development of the Brownfield site. Good evening. We have a tag team again.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. My name is David Warwick, and this is my colleague Elisa Lindsay. We are both from Envirologic, based in Kalamazoo. We're an environmental consulting firm, been in business for 32 years. This evening, we're going to talk about brownfield redevelopment and understanding that process. This is the science, a little bit of the science, a little bit of the business end of it. So I'll talk a little bit about the business end, and then Elisa will pick up on the technical end. So next slide, please. What's a brownfield? We think we know them when we drive by them, right? But there may be some types of brownfields that you don't really realize are actually classified as brownfields. 4 main classifications. The traditional contaminated site, the site that we know has contamination on it, that's kind of a no-brainer when it comes to a brownfield. Secondly, blighted property. This is property that's a public nuisance, it's dangerous, it's often abandoned, it's an eyesore. It also can be a property that's owned by a local land bank. Next is functionally obsolete. These are buildings that could potentially be used, but they can't be used for their original purpose anymore. It's just too difficult to redevelop them. A school, for example, a very old school, outdated, can't serve its purpose anymore, that could be considered a brownfield. And then kind of a special designation is historical resource. Those can also fall into the brownfield program. So that gives you kind of the 4 categories of brownfields. You have brownfields in your community. Yes, you do. There's been over 150 years of industrial development, and it's left a legacy of brownfield sites. It's estimated that there are more than 450,000 brownfield sites throughout the United States, 40,000 of those right here in Michigan, and then you have some right here in South Haven. They've been around for a long time. Prior to 1995, it was almost impossible to develop these sites. Nobody wanted to develop a brownfield site, largely because if they purchased that property, they also purchased any liability for environmental cleanup. They purchased that as well. The liability followed the property. So what happened? We started getting large numbers of brownfields in our communities, sitting there doing nothing, not on the tax rolls, uncontrolled contamination, et cetera. So in '95, the state of Michigan developed its brownfield program, multifaceted. First thing they did is they provided liability protection for developers of contaminated property. It's a causation liability. If you didn't cause the problem, if you didn't cause the contamination, then you weren't liable to clean it up, to close it. Okay, that was the first thing. Secondly, they changed the cleanup approach. They looked at it from a risk perspective. Elisa's going to talk quite a bit more about that. So that is, does the site pose a risk of exposure? Thirdly, they also created grants and other funding opportunities to help offset some of the increased cost in developing contaminated property or brownfields. Next slide, please. So really, what is brownfield redevelopment? You heard some examples just earlier, and it's vast. So first of all, it's revitalizing and reinvesting in brownfield properties. It provides tools and resources to developers to consider a site that may be challenged. It's vacant, blighted, or contaminated. These tools can help offset costs associated with those conditions. Brownfield redevelopment encourages the reuse of public infrastructure that's already there. It's just not being utilized. Eliminates blight and vacancy, and addresses and manages site contamination for site reuse. Some of these brownfields will never get cleaned up if they just sat there. They're uncontrolled. So by redeveloping them, what you do is you actually control some of those exposures. You can stop the contamination and you can control the exposure. It takes development pressures off of green spaces. Prior to 1995, if you wanted to build a building, you're building it on farmland or new property. You don't have to do that now. It improves the value and well-being of surrounding properties, and in many cases, it can return property back to the tax rolls, generating revenue. So that brings us into what is the actual process. And it starts with the phase 1 environmental site assessment, and I'll let Elisa talk through that.
I'll make this lower. Thank you, David. So now that we've learned kind of what is a brownfield, what does it look like, what is some of the potential that it comes with, I'm going to walk through the process of getting through a redevelopment and primarily going through due diligence. So due diligence is the responsibility of the person or entity that is looking to redevelop a brownfield property such that it's used safely. So that's the main purpose of due diligence, is that you're using a property safely and not exacerbating any kind of potential risk that might exist. So that process entails 4 main components. We have our phase 1 environmental site assessment. That's followed by a phase 2 environmental site assessment. Then there's a baseline environmental assessment, and that provides liability protection. So I'll go into more detail on that. And then lastly, the due care obligations, and that is really the most important part, in my opinion, of this whole brownfield redevelopment process, because that is the part where you are using that property safely and you are identifying measures in order to do that. Now I'll walk through each step and kind of go into details of what each of those means. Okay. But before we go into those steps, I just want to clarify the difference and the nuances between a cleanup versus risk management. So we hear the term cleanup a lot when we're talking about contamination. Brownfield redevelopment doesn't necessarily mean cleanup. It is more focusing on risk management, similar to what David was describing from those regulations in 1995 and moving more to a risk-based approach to sites of environmental contamination. So every community in Michigan has contaminated land of various usage. There are contaminated residential, commercial, and industrial facilities and sites. Now, cleanup, as we traditionally think of it, is the obligation of the party that caused that contamination or that release. So that's a causational liability part of cleanup. That lies with the entity that's responsible for that release. It can also go along with if someone does not try to obtain liability protection. So that is that's an important aspect of this due diligence. that baseline environmental assessment. So that provides liability protection. And I'll go into how that's conducted and how that provides liability protection. Now, just as a note, it is virtually impossible to remove all contamination. So getting something back to a pristine situation is very difficult, primarily from a feasibility and technical availability of ways to do that, to get back to before something got impacted. So there's just something to keep in mind with regards to cleanup as well. So focusing on the risk posed is a safer option and more achievable. However, a contaminated site can still be viable for redevelopment, and there are many redevelopments of these sites occurring across the state. And again, it's been happening since about 1995 when these programs came into place to help facilitate redevelopment of brownfields versus green spaces. The state of Michigan has established risk-based cleanup criteria for many chemicals, and that helps to quantify the risks to human health and environment. So those are established numbers that the state has in statute. And scientists and engineers, we use these criteria to determine if a potential risk is present. Risk, if they're identified, they can be eliminated, managed, or mitigated to allow for safe reuse of a property. And that's the main component of due care. And risk management is the responsibility of a property owner and or the operator, and that's referred to as their due care obligation. So that's regardless of your liability status, you have an obligation to operate your property safely. So the phase one, this is the first step in the due diligence process. It's really taking a look at existing information and historical databases to identify any known and potential environmental concerns related to the property. And this is also known as the all appropriate inquiry process. So you'll look through databases, we'll do an environmental database radius search, within a certain distance of the property in question, just to identify if there's any reason to believe that there might be contamination present at the site. If there are recognized environmental concerns or potential environmental concerns associated with that property based on that all appropriate inquiry, we would go next into a phase two environmental site assessment. And this is where we actually collect samples from the property itself, soil, groundwater, and or soil gas, to identify what chemicals might actually be present and at what levels that they might be present. And we use that information to determine if there's any potential risk associated with that property. If we identify that there is contamination either known to exist because there's already some existing data on that particular property, or through our phase two investigation, a new or prospective owner would then seek liability protection through baseline environmental assessment, and then implement due care measures to use the property safely. So liability protection, that is obtained through a baseline environmental assessment. So that's a combination of the phase one, the phase two, and identifying the nature of the contaminant on site. So in Michigan, preparation and disclosure of this baseline environmental assessment is submitted to the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and that provides a new owner or operator of a contaminated property cleanup liability protection. So essentially, they do not become liable they don't purchase the contamination that happens to already exist at the property. However, to preserve this liability protection, the owner and operator of the contaminated site must comply with their ongoing due care obligations associated with the contamination on site. So they know that it's there. They're not held liable to clean up that contamination, but they have an obligation to make sure that the risks are mitigated so that no one that is coming onto the property, your employees, your construction workers, anyone who's coming onto the property, you're ensuring that they are not being exposed to any risks associated with that existing contamination. So once your baseline environmental assessment is in place, you have liability protection from the existing contamination, you have due care obligations. So those are the things that you put into place to make sure that those risks that might exist on your site are mitigated. So again, this doesn't mean cleanup. They're not responsible for cleaning up the contamination, but they would have to take measures to ensure that that risk isn't possibly being exposed to any person. So we have administrative and our engineering controls that could be used such as signage, barriers, notifications. There might be a requirement to have a mitigation system, and these are all ways that you would make sure people are notified because they need to know that it's there, and then having a way to protect them from potential exposures. Now, these programs are self-implemented. However, Eagle does enforce the due care obligations of property owners. They maintain on file the baseline environmental assessments, and they ensure compliance with those due care obligations. So they can ask for documentation to ensure that a property is being used safely. There are some exemptions offered to units of governments and land banks if the property is involuntarily acquired, such as through tax foreclosure. And that's really in a situation where the property is not actively sought by the unit of government, it happens to default to the unit of government. So like David mentioned, you know, at one time it is, or even now, it would be less expensive to develop on green space. You don't have to deal with the potential contaminants on site. You might have a blighted building on your property. So there are programs in place to help offset those costs related to that. Those are through the legislation that's been implemented since 1995 and has evolved since that time. Eagle and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation have various funding mechanisms in place to help defray costs through grants, loans, your tax increment financing, and various other funding mechanisms that help to facilitate redevelopment of these brownfield spaces. And the city of South Haven does have a brownfield redevelopment authority to help, again, offset these costs and help to navigate through all these different funding mechanisms and ensure that programs are implemented appropriately. So with that, that is our overview of the program and the process. Our contact information above, and we thank you for your time.
I don't, just quick council questions. Can you just clarify, and I mean, Kate, jump in here too. We've reiterated our commitment to ensuring this is cleaned up properly, but we don't have we don't have an official plan. You hear us here talking about concepts, what's going to be on the site. We don't have a plan yet. So to speculate on how something is cleaned up is impossible. I mean, we can guess, but I mean, we can't. Could you just explain why we just can't just spit out exactly what this is going to look like today?
Sure. You know, the more information that comes out about a property and its development, the more you'll be able to look at that information and then start to get a picture of what type of due care activities that they're going to have to implement. So right now, what I would assume is it's in the early stages. They're going through their due diligence process, doing all the things that Elisa just outlined. Once that due diligence process is finished, then they'll have that information. They'll have the contaminant information, more contaminant information maybe than what they currently have or what's existing. Then they'll be able to make a proposal to the city, say, this is what we have and this is what we have to do. This is what we're required to do according to our due care obligations, which is minimizing and reducing that risk.
And who established the due care plan is in conjunction with Eagle?
Yes. In essence, yes. It is the developers or the property owner's responsibility to implement those due care obligations, those due care activities. The state is the enforcing agency. So the state has the ability, and it's state law, the state has the ability to come in and ask, and they do, what are your due care activities? What are your risks? What are the risks here, and how are you controlling those risks? Basically asking for what the plan is. So it's a little bit of, it's regulated and regulator relationship. Gotcha.
Can citizens have input on that due care plan?
Absolutely. Absolutely they can.
How does that happen?
It gets into more of really how you develop your brownfield program. If you have specific agreements with the developer, you as a city has the ability to compel, perhaps, the developer or the property owner to, or make things contingent on their successful completion of those due care obligations, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Now, you don't have the regulatory authority, so to speak, that the state has, but you can have the ability to say, yes, this is what you're required to do. Show us that you're doing that.
Right.
So it's kind of another layer.
Okay. And I will just say, having been on a previous council, we approved one of these, I would like to do a better job with this project to make sure we put those contingencies in place.
And we see that normally at the municipal level with the developer. That's where we see that relationship.
Okay. Because councils change and staff changes, and we need to make sure this transpires all of that, so.
Sure, and just one more thing to kind of jump in, and as they kind of talked about what your due care obligations are and what your plan is going to be, it also kind of helps as to what you're going to put out there and where you're going to put that out there. Because as they kind of mentioned, is that we talk about cleanup, but no brownfield that I've ever heard of is restoring a parcel to a greenfield before it's developed. Is that a pretty safe assumption? Have you ever heard of a brownfield being restored to greenfield-like conditions before it is redeveloped?
Very unusual.
There you go. So by saying that, what we're also trying to do, and this kind of goes along with the state of Michigan, this is a risk-based approach. So they're trying to mitigate any exposure to any contaminants on site. Now, what that all means is that when they go to the Brownfield Authority, and we have one here in the city, and there's also one here in the county, so they have two options, and sometimes the county has EPA funds that might be for petroleum or other hazard materials, and that might be an incentive for them to look at the county, but there's also the city has a Brownfield Authority. When they go to the Brownfield Authority, they work and they bring up a plan, there's a development agreement, there's a TIF agreement, tax sharing revenue agreement, and that kind of addresses some of the concerns that have been voiced here tonight, but it also kind of tells everybody when the Brownfield plan is how things are going to be, as risk is being mitigated, and how is it going to be dealt with, and who's going to be in charge of what. Is that affairs?
Yes. Spot on.
Based on you've heard some discussions about what we're talking about putting on the site and your knowledge of the site in general, are we where we should be as far as in this process?
Yeah, I think so, based on what my understanding is, that you're progressing in that logical sequence of steps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So.
That's why we have you here. So perfect. Thank you. Any other questions of this group? If not, let's get a recess.
Just
real
quick, I think it's important, and this is something I learned, and thank you very much for being here. We should stay away from the term cleanup, because this is not going to be a cleanup. This is going to be a risk-based, as Kate mentioned, a risk-based approach to mitigating the risks on the site.
And my question, just because I want to hear it again. Alicia, when you were talking about how this is self-implemented for them to follow these plans, and so no one likes politicians, no one trusts politicians. So for the public out there, if they felt like it wasn't being addressed, what steps do they have at their disposal to make sure that these are being done correctly? And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, either of you.
That's okay. I had the privilege of working for Eagle for several years before joining Envirologic, so I've kind of seen that side of things. They often will encourage developers and brownfield authorities to contact them with regards to specifics or plans or, acceptability of those types of things. So that is one avenue. Eagle's website has quite a few resources available with regards to what is a due care obligation, what statutes govern those. They have a citizen's guide, so they have some pretty good resources available as far as understanding what the process is and what those different types of measures might look like. So I guess from the standpoint of a citizen is really getting is informing yourself so that you can make an educated decision and understand what's happening when those types of developments are happening in your community, and then getting involved in exactly this type of process is what I would advise people to do.
And then I think I heard you saying, and if you see something, say something.
If you see something, say something.
tell
Ask
somebody.
a question.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to ask a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
Mr. Schlag.
I was involved in a development that had a due care plan, and it was incorporated into the master deed of the condominium development. For example, there was a no-dig policy in there as part of the due care plan. If this is an apartment complex and it's owned by Habitat, is there something there that ends up on the deed with the due care plan restrictions? Or as part of the plan?
I would say right now it's too early to say what that would look like because there's a lot of different types of administrative, engineering, and design measures that one might take to address different types of potential risks. So I would say right now it's premature to say that you might end up with a deed restriction. That is one of the avenues to try to control future exposures, but that also has to be in concert with something that's happening currently that controls that exposure as well. So that's controlling future exposures when you have a deed restriction or a no dig that implies that there's some type of cover or some type of design that happened in advance that's providing that level of protection from someone maybe contacting impacted soil. So I would say right now it's preliminary, too early to say if that would be an option, but there are lots of different options to have mitigative measures. It's really a bit, knowing what the plan is, the use, the layout, where your areas of contamination are. There's lots of different variables that go into deciding what's the most cost-effective and long-term solution for mitigating risks.
Thank you.
It's a good question. Kind of connects to what I'm getting at. I've got to make sure it goes on, that it's understood. So, okay, anybody else? How about a motion for a recess, and then we can come back and continue?
I'll make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
I'll second.
Motion second, take a recess. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're take 5. excuse Chris. He wasn't
Yeah.
feeling well.
Sorry, what?
Chris had to leave, he's not feeling well, so I need a motion to excuse Chris.
All right. So yeah, back into open.
Well, not yet, but.
Make a motion to go back into open session.
Second.
Motion second to go back into open session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're back.
Make a motion to excuse Councilman Campbell.
Second.
Motion is second to excuse Council Member Chris Campbell. He was not feeling well, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. He is excused. Hopefully, he feels better a little later. Okay, we're now going to discuss, council will be asked to consider the approval of a purchase and development agreement for the Habitat Company.
Oh, no.
Just need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase and development agreement of with the Habitat Company.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. And before we get into this, I forgot to state when we came back, those presentations, which were excellent, by the way, we will get those uploaded onto the Overton site as soon as we get them all set, as soon as staff does their magic. So all very good information. So, all right. So we have a motion, we have a second. Kate, fill us in on the purchase and development agreement. Where are we at? What's changed? All that
Well,
good stuff.
Very good, Mayor. What we do have is Attorney Curcio has put together a presentation to kind of go over some of the differences between the September 7th draft and what you're seeing here today. The proposed agreement is fairly lengthy and complex, so I think Nick wanted to kind of walk through it, and then we'll take questions from council and, of course, the public here about any questions they may have about this. And Nick, if you want to start walking through your presentation, of course, if the council members have any questions, they can feel free to just kind of jump in with their questions, and we can address those then.
Sure. So council members will probably recognize a lot of this presentation from the first meeting in September. But a couple of things have changed since that time, largely based on direction that we were given by council during the discussion at the September meeting, as well as some changes that need to be made based on the adjustment in timing from Habitat's request to move from a concept where they would be submitting their MISH application in October to one where they'll be submitting in April for the first time. So some of the dates have shifted and things like that. I would note that there's a red line in the packet that shows all the changes, computer-generated red line, so it shows everything that changed between the first meeting in September, where the agreement was on the agenda for the first time, and today's draft. That's before you for consideration of final approval. So with that, I'll move on to the presentation. So as everyone knows by this point, the city owns a lot at 229 Elkenberg, which is the former site of the Overton Company, the manufacturing site for many years. In June of 2020, the city posted an RFP seeking developers interested in constructing housing on the site, and Habitat Company was determined to be the most qualified, and since that determination was made, the city's been actively working to prepare a purchase and development agreement for the site that's before council tonight for final consideration. So what we have proposed by Habitat is a three-phase proposal. Two phases are rental housing product, and those are shown on the southernmost part of the site, with the northernmost part of the site being a for sale portion. These were formerly referred to as phases 1, 2, and 3. We're no longer using those terms because it's not entirely clear what order they'll be developed in. What we do know for sure is that rental phase 1 will be developed first, and then for sale phase and rental phase 2 will be developed sometime after that, possibly simultaneously, possibly with the for sale phase preceding the rental phase 2. Just kind of depending on how things play out. One thing that under the current agreement is that rental phase 2 cannot be started until Habitat, if there's no assignment to a third party, until they close on the property. So that's just kind of an incentive that's built in to make sure that the for sale phase is built as planned. It's probably the least profitable of the three phases. So by structuring it that way, we ensure that it gets built kind of to open give the keys over to develop the rental phase 2, which is probably more profitable for the developer. So the next slide kind of discusses the phase purchasing. We're contemplating 3 separate closings, so the city will retain title to portions of the property as the development and remediation activities are ongoing on other portions of the site. Before any closings occur, Habitat will have until at least August 31 of 2022 to seek required approvals and conduct other due diligence that can potentially be extended if LIHTC approval has not been granted by that point. There are 3 different purchase prices laid out in the agreement. The rental phase 1 and rental phase 2 are at $40,000, and the for sale phase is at $20,000, and those are kind of structured based on the number of incentives involved. As council knows, there's less incentives available for a for sale product than a rental product, and that's why the purchase price is lower comparatively for that phase. In terms of the purchasing timeline, Griffin, on the next slide. This has changed a little bit, as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, just based on the delay of the initial application. We now have closing to occur within 90 days of the satisfaction of the last closing condition imposed by MSHDA. And basically the projection for that is mid-2023 if Habitat were to get LIHTC funding in one of their earlier applications, like, for example, the one this spring. We're anticipating approximately a year after the award of credits for the closing to occur, but Habitat wanted a little bit of flexibility to make sure they can satisfy any MSHDA closing conditions that may possibly extend beyond that year timeline that was included in the prior version of the agreement. For the for sale phase, closing must occur by December 31, 2025, as currently written. And again, the for sale phase may be potentially assigned in a later agreement. You had the presentation from Dwelling Place. We're actively pursuing the possibility of an assignment, and if an assignment were to occur, it's likely we would modify some of the terms of this to meet Dwelling Place's needs. We'll talk about that in terms of a deed restriction that's in here for the for sale phase that would probably need to be changed to kind of come into compliance with Dwelling Place's program. The way that Habitat would deed restrict the site is maybe a little bit different than how Dwelling Place would do it. So there is some flexibility with the for sale phase, pretty much all the requirements relating to the for sale phase, including this purchasing timeline and construction timeline. But the terms of this agreement are with the assumption that Habitat would continue to own and continue to own and develop the for sale phase. Again, we're looking to probably shift that to a third party, but Habitat is offering to and taking on the contractual responsibility to develop the for sale phase unless and until we assign it to Dwelling Place or some other party down the road. Does everyone understand that concept? Okay. And then for rental phase 2, again, the closing on this phase cannot occur until construction has substantially commenced on the for sale parcel or unless the assignment document to Dwelling Place or anyone else provides otherwise. So if Habitat kind of releases that responsibility for that phase, then maybe they would have the option to go ahead and proceed with for sale phase 2 because another party would be taking on the obligations for the rental phase 2 because another party would be taking on the obligations for the for sale phase. Next slide. So environmental remediation was addressed extensively in your prior presentation. I won't dwell on it here, but the agreement does commit Habitat to remediating the site to appropriate level for residential development. That will be an obligation under state law anyway. There will be kind of some, the state is the primary regulator for environmental issues, but the city has the opportunity for input, especially through the brownfield process. The funding for this project is kind of contingent on the ability to have a brownfield plan approved, and conditions can be imposed, city-specific conditions can be imposed through the implementation of that plan. That's something that will be done as part of due diligence with an application, following fairly shortly after the PUD application, which we'll discuss here in a minute. Go ahead. So in terms of the timeline for due diligence, we have PUD approval will be the first step. The agreement requires that application to be submitted by November 30. Hopefully it could come in a little bit before that and possibly have a public hearing as early as the December meeting If not, perhaps the planning commission could at least preliminarily discuss it at the December meeting and then come back for public hearing at the January meeting. That timeline's a little bit flexible at this point, but we have a kind of required submission by November 30. We have a kind of a new process built into this agreement for a separate approval of AMI tables, and these would be very similar to the AMI tables that council reviewed at the first item of tonight's agenda. Unlike the prior draft of the agreement, this draft of the agreement does not actually have those AMI tables included in them. And the reason for that is we received feedback from council members, certainly comments from the public, that it was premature to include those actually as contractual obligations, not knowing what the result of the PUD approval process is going to be. It is possible that the PUD approval process could result in a change in the total number of units. So this gives kind of a process. First, we get the unit count absolutely set by the Planning Commission, then followed up with approval by the City Council, and then at that point, the tables are revised if need be based on the unit count, or if not, I think Habitat intends to basically present the same tables that it presented tonight for Council's final review and approval. The project does not go forward unless Council approves the tables at that time, or revised tables. If you request revised tables, it's a condition to closing that you review and approve those. Following that approval, they would submit their Habitat, they being Habitat, would submit their first LIHTC application to MSHDA by April 1. This is the kind of second round of funding under this new set of guidelines from MSHDA. And then this is actually a mistake. It says Habitat to submit brownfield plan anytime during due diligence. There actually is a more firm timeline than that. It's 120 days after the PUD approval is given. So basically, we'd be looking at probably midsummer. They would have to submit it before then. And then that gives several months before MSHDA would make any decision on the closing conditions and things like that. So we have quite a bit of time built in there. The rental phase 1 development conditions. The project would have to be constructed in accordance with the PUD approval. The units would be rent controlled under the LIHTC program for at least 30 years. MSHDA would likely require 50 years. That's subject to MSHDA's discretion. And then the agreement builds in a repurchase option at the expiration of the LIHTC program. So if a developer, either Habitat or a future owner of the property, would ever want to convert these units into market rate units and get out of the LIHTC program, the city would then have the first option to purchase that property from the developer for fair market value as determined by an appraisal at that time, in order to keep the units as affordable thereafter. But we're talking likely 50 years down the road at that point. And that's in a deed restriction that's memorialized in Exhibit C to the agreement, and would apply both to rental phase 1 and to rental phase 2. And with all the various phases, short-term rentals are prohibited. That will be memorialized, I think, in deed restriction. It's also a part of the MSHDA agreement, but we have the ability for separate deed restrictions on each of the 3 parcels created in the transaction. Next slide. So I already explained this a little bit. This is just speaking to that January approval process of the AMI levels. I think I already covered this completely, so we can move on to the next slide. This is just a table showing sample rental rates based on the AMI levels. You saw the tables of what those AMI levels would be, how they'd be broken down in terms of the mix of units. These just show what the MSHDA requirements are for the actual rental rates based on the AMI of the person who lives in the unit, just for reference. Let's see. So other notes on the rental income levels. This came up kind of earlier in the discussion with some questions from council to Mr. Head of Habitat about what those 40% AMI units will look like. Mr. Head correctly responded that there's no requirement to offer those to, no requirement to fill those with any particular type of applicant, but there actually is a requirement to make what's called, the contractual term uses the phrase best efforts, to offer those to disabled individuals and that through the voucher program, as well as to elderly individuals. And it mentions some specific examples of what those efforts would be. They would include applying for the housing choice vouchers that we discussed earlier in the meeting, as well as working with the South Haven Housing Commission to identify potentially interested elderly applicants who are already in the community, perhaps already living in housing units provided by the Housing Commission, to try to, specifically offer the opportunity to those individuals and perhaps have them move from rental housing or something of that nature into these units, which would in turn open up opportunities for other people to fill the rental units. So that's kind of what we're envisioning there. It's more of a requirement to make good efforts to market and that type of thing, as opposed to a requirement to fill. As Mr. Ahead mentioned, you can't specifically require what kind of tenant is going to fill a unit, that you run into fair housing law issues with that type of requirement. And again, this best efforts requirement applies to both rental phase 1 and rental phase 2. Let's see. The for sale development conditions, these are, as I spoke earlier, are things that would apply if Habitat is a developer of the for sale phase. If Dwelling Place becomes a developer of the for sale phase, these are likely to change at least a little bit in order to incorporate their community trust concept. The AMI levels, I think, would come down somewhat. Habitat's reserving half of the units for people under 120% AMI. My understanding is that Dwelling Places can only go up to 110% AMI, and also Dwelling Places talked about needing some units at 80% AMI. Potentially, that was the question that you had asked. So, we're just beginning those discussions to see how their requirements might be different. But this is assuming that assignment never happens and Habitat develops it. This is what Habitat has committed to. So it would be half of the proposed 26 units, so 13 of the units would be offered only to households earning under 100% AMI, and the other half under 120% AMI. And then in terms of the deed restriction, they could not be resold. And here, this is assuming a resale of the entire property, land and home, as opposed to the Dwelling Place concept, which is home only. Habitat would guarantee basically what translates to $250,000 in today's dollars. There's a formula in the agreement that's based on AMI at the time. So if AMI increases substantially in South Haven, then that purchase price would increase correspondingly with it. If AMI goes down in South Haven, or at least subject to inflation, then the housing price cap would go down as well. So it's basically moving with the AMI levels, today's AMI levels. And then again, units would be prohibited from being short-term rentals. Does anyone have any questions about that portion? This slide just discusses the possibility of a third-party developer, namely Dwelling Place at this point, possibly revisit some of these terms in a subsequent agreement with them. That could come anytime during due diligence. Could frankly come after due diligence, but staff is committed to keep this discussion going and getting something to council as soon as it makes sense to do so, possibly after the PUD approval. We might be ready to really lock in numbers and things with Dwelling Place at that time. So with respect, some of the comments from the public and as well as council members at the September meeting related to remedies. I did go back and look at the remedies in the agreement. For the most part, concluded that they were very strong as written originally. We did add some additional language. In particular, we clarified that any violation of the PUD conditions or PUD site plan are not only ordinance violations, because they are by operation of state law. Anytime you violate a site plan, you're committing an ordinance violation. They're also violations of the agreement. And the effect of that is that if the city were to do an enforcement action on the violation of a site plan and were to prevail, it would be eligible to recover attorney's fees, because that's a contractual remedy that only applies to violations of the contract. The rest of the remedies provisions, again, we looked them over again. We think that they're very strong. We have the ability to withhold closing on other phases for material violations. We have ability to seek specific enforcement and a number of other remedies as well. So if anyone has questions about remedies, I'd be happy to answer those. And then finally, a lot of the discussion at the September meeting focused on building in future flexibility. There were council members who asked about hypothetical scenarios if the for sale phase wasn't selling, or sorry, the for sale phase sold very well and the rental phases were having trouble renting, and wanted us to discuss with Habitat what kind of flexibility, if any, could be built into the agreement. Mr. Head sort of addressed this during his comments, and I think it just makes sense conceptually. The developer's profit margin is based on the ability to do this whole entire development kind of as planned. So contractual language that gives unilateral flexibility in future phases just makes the numbers too hypothetical for the developer to move forward with its financing, with its project, and things like that. So rather than, I suggested that would likely be the case at the September meeting, and Habitat confirmed that it was the case. What we've done instead is just, we have an acknowledgement, and it's specifically in the portion of the agreement talking about rental phase 2, that's quoted here, word for word from the agreement, saying that the parties acknowledge that there may be conditions at the time when we get to rental phase 2, which could be 5 years down the road, that are different than the conditions now. It lists some examples. The state of the economy, the types of government programs that are available at that time. Again, there's constantly changing programs. Mr. Kilpatrick's firm works with the state in coming up with kind of better options for developers, that there may be new options available then that aren't that now. Then also just the housing needs within the community, and this goes to the points raised by council members about, we don't know what the future's going to look like. We don't know what the need's going to be at that time. So this provision basically just commits the parties to continuing to work with each other, to acknowledge that this isn't necessarily how the deal is going to transpire. This is a major long-term partnership, and I would personally be very surprised if the agreement's not amended at least one time. That's just how these developments tend to work out. You can't anticipate everything, and the parties very often will come back to the table down the road and go a slightly different direction than what was thought. So this is just kind of commitment of both parties to be open to that down the road. It was the best we could do to address that point. So that's all I had. If anyone has questions, please let me know.
Council, on questions now, or would you like to hear from the public? Public first? All right. Because we do have a motion and a second, so public, if you would like to ask questions about the proposed purchase and development agreement, come on up, state your name, address. You'll have up to 5 minutes to address the council. Good evening.
Good evening. Kay Engelbrecht, 125 Elkenberg Street. I have just a few questions of things that have been brought up tonight that would affect the purchase agreement. Am I correct that the closing would have to happen prior to any construction, any remediation, any risk management stuff takes place?
Good. Yeah.
That's correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So does that mean if in one of the items up there, it was the rental 1 closing is projected for mid to late 2023, does that mean that there wouldn't be any risk management or due diligence or any of that stuff happen prior to then?
The due care that's currently being undertaken by the city under its due care plan would continue till that time.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
The city currently has a due care plan in place for that property, and that plan would remain in place until replaced by a plan put into effect by Habitat. So basically, the steps that are currently being taken would continue to be taken until that time.
And the current steps are just to leave it marked off and nothing going on there?
Correct.
Correct, okay. I also have a question about the risk management. I'm wondering if it would be the same, if it's possible or if you can predict, or perhaps Envirologic people could be helpful, if it would be like the remediation that took place at the factory condos in the back portion where you have just the land, but there's not allowed to be any construction on top of that, or no digging can take place. When would we know? Would that be after the closing that would be determined?
What's your thought on that? Once we have a
Well,
site plan.
I think that when I think we already had some communication that there's a lot of unknowns right now, so it's a little too early to tell. But going through the process, there's PUD approvals and there's brownfield plan. I mean, those are things that would be worked out, at least part of a amendment to the brownfield plan.
So I guess I'm not sure how to ask this, whether it's a question. If the risk management plan and the due care and the all those little steps that Envirologic was presenting to us, if Eagle says that there can't be any digging on the plan, would that mean that it would have to be concreted over or something like that and build on top of it?
Yeah.
Is that a
Well,
potential?
I guess we'd have to see what Eagle would have to say, but there's a brownfield plan process that they kind of went through, and there's multiple steps, and there's lots of things that go into that. Where is the risk, how to mitigate that, and what is causing the risk, and what's the unnecessary exposure. And it's kind of hard for me to say what would happen, but a brownfield plan would be, I believe, submitted to Eagle, especially if this is going to be a LIHTC program that MSHDA would oversee. They would have to review that brownfield as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I had some comments about the missing middle. I'm concerned with the graph and table that Mr. Head presented, that for the missing middle, of the 58 units proposed, only 8 of them would be for missing middle, and that's only 14% of them. So if we're trying to target missing middle, we're still not doing that. 86%, in fact, would be in the levels below the missing middle. Thank you.
Gotcha. Jared.
And if you're for the purchasing, only 18% would be in the missing middle also. The other 84, or whatever that would be, 82, would be lower than the missing middle. So again, if we're aiming towards missing middle, the vast majority of what's being presented is for lower than the missing middle. So I just want to stress that. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Next. Anybody else?
Hi, Mary Lynn Boogie, 70 Gabriel Drive. I'm talking about this now because you're looking at forming an agreement with these, and I know you've all heard over and over again about our concerns regarding the density and the design and the parking. And I really haven't seen a lot of consideration of that coming from the council. And I'd just like to give you an example of a development with MSHDA funds that was developed, and it was on approximately 11 acres. There were 66 units in 8 buildings. It had single, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom apartments. Each apartment had amenities including mini blinds, dishwashers, frost-free refrigerators, microwave ovens, central air conditioning, individual washers and dryers, which this is not part of this development, cable TV hookups, balconies, patios, and there are carports available, which was not included in the rent. They would have to pay additional for that. They had individual gas meters and electric meters, and community space, a tot lot, maintenance garage, and irrigation systems. That is a density that would be appropriate on this property. It is a density that would blend in with the community, would blend in with the area. And so I really wish that something like this would be under consideration. if you're wondering where this development is, it's right here in South Haven Township. It's called Park Meadows. And I'm wondering, why haven't we considered developing something like that? That's amenable to the people who live around it, that would still give you the low-income housing that you're looking for, but it would be compatible with the area. I do wish that you would, before signing this, that you would go and do some more diligent exploration of what can go on that property. Yes, it may not be as beneficial in raising in profits for the developer, but it would be much more beneficial to the community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, come on.
Dan Agnello, 964 Everett Parkway. I've got a kind of question on the remediation and the TIF. Now, according to the purchase order, you don't get any TIF money until you're into the building phase. So what happens in phase one? How does the builder get his money for remediating, all the pollution? There's no TIF money until you get to phase two, the building it. So I don't understand it. It's written in the purchase order, but I don't see how Habitat gets their money. And I still don't like this density thing, okay? I said we could do 60 units for phase one, 40 units for phase two to purchase. You clean it all up at once, you build it all up at the same time. You don't have to worry about remediating each individual one and keeping pollution from the other two properties and putting your signs up, and people aren't going to stay off that property no matter what you put on there, okay? Just build 100 units, and even that's too high density. I'd like to see 60, but Habitat has told us on April 27th meeting that they can make money, get Michigan money for 60 units. But I've told you this in 10 or 15 meetings or whatever it is. They have not given us alternate plans. Everything we talked about today based on percentages and everything is based on the plan. The plan is 144 units. And they're going to go into the PC and say, we have to have 144 units. We have to have it because Michigan won't approve it. We've got to have vouchers from 0 to 40% because Michigan won't approve it, okay? PC is going to approve that for 144 units. The density on that property is almost 300 people. What's the population for South Haven? 3,900. Do the math. It's about 8%. We're putting 8% of our population in a property less than 6 acres. The density doesn't make any sense. I wish you guys would really think hard again about density. Cut it in half or whatever, 75 units. But 144 units, me sitting in my front lawn looking at a 3-story apartment building on the corner is not my idea, okay? I'd just like to have you think about that seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we'll still need to make it through the planning process. Kate, do you want to just explain the brownfield, how the money's recouped?
Well, part of a brownfield plan is that you have to put up a pro forma together that will cover your eligible expenses and those eligible expenses go to due care activities as well as mitigating on risk, exposure of risk. A pro forma goes out for the length of the plan that's being asked for, so they can go up to 25 years. The last 5 years, it can go up to 30, but the last 5 years are always reserved for the local brownfield revolving fund. So those 5 years, the TIF that's generated goes into the local brownfield revolving fund. So you can go up to 25 years, and that's by state law. I guess I should restate. You can go up to 30 years, and that's by state law, but typically the 5 years are reserved. TIF is generated based on a taxable value is set, and then over time, TIF is generated, and what's set at that level above that, that's recaptured and returned to the developer to repay them for costs that are paid out to address due care activities and essential eligible expenses. So like I said, it's the increment that's above that is increased over time. So once you start building things, once you start doing things, the taxable value seems to go up. That's where you get the increase. That increase of revenue, the tax increment revenue, that's what gets paid back to the developer. And when I say gets paid back to the developers, because the developer must do those items first to get paid back. So it's a long-term plan to to mitigate exposure while developing the site and to make sure that those activities occur first and then they get paid back over time using that increased revenue from baseline that was set when the plan was adopted.
And that's one of those tools that they were discussing that was
That's correct.
implemented to encourage the cleanup of these sites. So, good questions, good question. All right, next.
Mary Hosley, 726 North Shore Drive. First, I don't believe TIF is available with LIHTC because you have your tax abatement. With regard to the proportion of units presented, I think it's misleading. The average AMI for the market, I believe, is the rents that were given were really 70 and 80% AMI, so it seems like it's really just changing the name, but it's still the same impact. And police officers would make 100% AMI and they will not qualify. So it's misrepresenting what our local teachers, our police officers would or would not qualify. I believe that the lack of the deed restriction in the originally published agenda on Wednesday prevents that this agreement was properly noticed. It wasn't there. I do not know when it was added, but it was not in the originally published. And we had discussed this, and we were told that everything would be in the agenda item, the agenda packet that when it went out, and it was not. In the exhibits, you infer that the Planning Commission will have the ability to change things. That's required by the PUD, but including the exhibits in the agreement, there is an inference that you are approving the density as suggested, and that is just not consistent with our master plan. It's not consistent with the RFP. Doesn't matter how many times you say it's consistent, it's not. Master plan had about 70 units, 80 units. The RFP had about 100 units. 144 is not consistent with those. Doesn't matter how you say it. For clarity, the agreement lacks conciseness. I believe that rental phase 1 property versus the whole parcel is misleading, and you should move articles 2.2 A through B, 2.3, and 2.4 into Article 1. They apply to the parcel as a whole, not phase property, rental phase 1. The survey, that should really just be in Article 1. You could reference it in all the sub-articles, but it really is to the whole plot. The inspections, it makes sense to have it in each article, but again, it really should be at the very front because it has to be completed by the end of close of rental phase 1. With regard to property, I believe there's a typographical error, a misrepresentation. With regard to 2.6E, it's reference to property, and I think it should be rental phase 1 parcel. The closing is misleading and confusing and at least indefinite. Closing is a term, capital term, which is defined, but in each parcel, each child parcel has a different closing date. So there is significant confusion. Each should be identified as either rental phase 1 closing, for sale closing, or rental phase 2 closing to avoid confusion. The lot splits, you say that you've done it so that it's not required, but the wording you've chosen has not addressed the issue. In section 2.2, under title commitments, you say promptly after receipt of the survey and approval of the lot splits. So it assumes that that is happening, but you cannot guarantee that it will happen. With regard to environmental, phase cleanup is not acceptable, and as we've already discussed numerous times, yes, you may have a certificate of occupancy, but look at what happened at factory condos. People were there, and shops had to close because it wasn't done properly. With regard to contacting Eagle, I have done that several times. They are limited in what they can do, and if the developer doesn't want to comply, their ability to make them comply is very limited. And so I would recommend, as was suggested, that the agreement have some teeth put in it. You put a carrot and a stick. And with regard to the different phases, if
You have 1 minute.
remediation isn't completely done, then it cannot go. There's so many things wrong with this agreement that I cannot get to them all in 5 minutes. Let's see, due diligence period, let's put this one out. So you reference due diligence period, and then in 3.6 and 2.6, with regard to Habitat's rights to terminate, you reference due diligence period, but there isn't an option to extend it, but you don't say extended due diligence period if that exists. You just say due diligence. With regard to the rental phase, you say it will be limited at 3% pilot. Why can it not be negotiable? We already saw in the submissions by others, they were willing to go to 4% pilot and paying twice as much as Habitat is. This agreement is benefit Habitat, not the citizens. It's not ripe for execution at this time.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? Come on up. Good evening.
David Veenstra, 1220 Monroe Boulevard. I really want to speak just to density. I've heard this brought up, but I am still waiting for the reason why high density is bad. So I'd like to just talk about some of the advantages to density. It makes more efficient use of a variety of things, including public transit. Trash collection are a couple of examples. On a per-person basis, it makes much better use of all infrastructure. Far less water and sewer pipes are needed, fewer electrical lines, fewer sidewalks per person. It allows us to provide more affordable housing for more people. Lower density lowers the number of people that we can help with this affordable housing. So if we make this property less dense, now we don't have 144 units, maybe we have 60. That means we're helping a lot less people. I really like the idea of being able to grow the population of South Haven by, a few, 200 or 300 people. That sounds great to me. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, appreciate it.
Nancy Nat, 125 Elkenberg. I just need some clarification. Dwelling place was here as a maybe. Is that correct? We don't have any contract with them for that phase. So they were just talking, this is a possibility we could do a land trust. Envirologic was here just to explain what a baseline environmental assessment is. They have not been hired to do anything in terms of this project. Is that correct?
We consult with them on brownfields and this sort of redevelopment.
But this particular development, are they going to be doing anything on that?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they're our consultant.
Okay. So
Maybe you like to speak to that?
I guess, yes. So a brownfield plan really, when a brownfield plan is undertaken, the developer and their environmental consultant work on a draft plan, and the city and their environmental consultant review that plan that's submitted, and that's more of a negotiation. What has to be done? What does the pro forma look like? What are the other conditions? And then it's kind of a process that goes back and forth before, once all parties agree, and each party has their own environmental consultant that looks at it from their point of view, and we get a revenue sharing agreement that we typically bring with all brownfields. Then it's ready to go to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And then if the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority approves it, then it goes to the City Council. And of course, there's statutory requirements as to notice to the taxing jurisdictions and some wait periods. But that's the general idea, is that everyone has their own consultant and reviews it from their perspective.
Okay,
And
so
Envirologic is the city's consultant, so they
That's
will
correct.
be involved in that process.
Thank you. Okay, then my last question is, Mayor Smith, you said there would be citizen involvement in terms of it's not cleanup, we've heard that today, it's just risk minimizing the risk to the surrounding area and the people who are going to be living there. Is there going to be something built into this plan or this agreement that is going to address the citizens' input regarding that?
Kate, thoughts? I mean, what we're discussing was kind of that, when we get to the actual cleanup phase, that part of the brownfield plan. I mean,
Right.
it's not part of this. I mean, but at some point in time, we would have to have that discussion. I mean, you've heard, that was my question earlier, so.
At what point would that be?
Well, we've heard many times, well, at least we've heard from our brownfield consultants that it's very hard to prognosticate as to what's going to be needed out there without knowing what is going to be required by the PUD approval, where our building is going to be located and that sort of thing. So right now, we are working off a conceptual site plan, conceptual meaning that it's not set in stone, conceptual meaning it's not approved by zoning, conceptual meaning that it's not a site that does not have any zoning approvals. So once you do have your zoning approvals, so you have your site plan, you have your PUD, and you understand where is going to be the buildings and where is concrete or whatnot going to be placed, that all goes into a brownfield plan. As we have all kind of learned here tonight, that the state of Michigan works on a risk management approach. So knowing that you have your PUD approvals and your zoning approvals, and they have set down where things are going to be, so it's kind of locked in per se. Then you go to your brownfield plan and you say, well, this is what I want to work with. These are the state's guidelines as to criteria for cleanup. Let's work on a brownfield plan that addresses both of them, that also satisfies that works with the zoning approvals that you receive. So that's far enough in the future that they can't really know what those are until they get to those points.
I'm not asking to know. I'm asking to get some.
And so we're at 1 minute. Let me just, let me try to answer what I think you're asking. When it comes to the due care plan, when that process occurs, we will make sure that there is a process by which, because that's kind of what I've been getting at, that we will.
I'm just
We have
saying, why
some
can't
steps in
that just
place.
be built into this agreement?
So
Saying, when the due care plan is ready, the citizens will have some way of knowing about it.
The agreement requires the brownfield plan to be submitted 120 days after the zoning approval, which would put it early summer, most likely. If the zoning approval is given comes to the council in January, which is the current timeline, then 120 days is 4 months after that. We'll be looking at May.
Okay,
for
so
the
why
submission.
can't it just be built into it, though? That's my question.
It is. It is built into the agreement.
That the citizens get to have.
The public hearing is required by state law for brownfield plans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? One more.
Terry Harsh, 556 North Shore Drive, Lot 3. I share a lot of the same concerns that other people have already mentioned, but in addition to that, one of the things that concerns me is the large number of one-bedroom apartments, and families can't live in a one-bedroom apartment. And so I'm just wondering how the need was determined for how many one-bedroom, two-bedroom, three-bedroom apartments there are.
Actually, you know what? Any other questions? Let's
yeah.
gather all of them. Why don't we, I might call on one of our other two people here to get on the mix.
And a couple weeks ago, maybe it hasn't been that long, on Facebook, on the South Haven chat line, there was an ad from the Housing Commission that they need more families to apply for low-income housing, and also elderly and disabled. So if the Housing Commission is looking for applicants, how much of a need is there for some of these apartments? I'm just asking.
I don't want to really comment on South Haven chat line. Anybody else want to?
I guess in response to that one, I can tell you we've had meetings with the director of the South Haven Housing Commission, as well as contacted many of the other affordable housing developments in the area, and all of them have wait lists. So I can't speak to specifically what was put online, but to our understanding, there is a significant need for these types of housing in the area.
Okay, when I saw that on Facebook, I thought if they're out there trolling for applicants, the wait list can't be all that extensive. I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. And I'll, you want to tackle that? Just kind of why the mix and what's needed? And
So what we find in the marketplace is typically about a third of all households across Van Buren County are single adults with no kids at home, and 2/3 are two adults with no kids at home, and the remaining third tends to be families. So I think the proposal, in terms of the overall unit mix, we've got 10 proposed 3-bedrooms, and another, I think, 22 proposed 2-bedroom units. So it's a pretty good mix. Very often what we tend to see in terms of rental units is when families have more than 2 children at home, they tend to seek out single-family homes as for-rent products as opposed to apartment living. Typically, it's just more space to spread out. And so if there are single-family homes available for rent at a reasonable price point, that will be the preference for larger families.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And again, this is just one project. So, thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, seeing none. Council, any questions, comments after what we've just heard?
So I got a couple questions. So, Nick, going back to one, and I thought your presentation was very good. Thank you for that. But one thing I noticed is that in the proposed buyback after 30 years, I think it is, the city would buy, it's in like 2.10D, 2.10E, sorry. And it refers to Exhibit C, which is, kind of gives more details on the buyback proposal, but it's based on fair market value after 30 years, but our initial selling price to Habitat is not based on fair market value. It's based on just what the money we've put into it so far. So I'm just kind of wondering why we chose fair market value versus, something similar to what we are selling the property back to Habitat for. It just seems like it's kind of, you're not comparing apples to apples.
That's a good point. Something like purchase price adjusted for inflation. That's not what we propose as staff. It is something we could certainly ask Habitat if they would be willing to make that modification. That's obviously a modification that would be favorable to the city. That is a fair point.
I mean, that's 30 years down the road. So, and Habitat would have had significant resources into the development of the property. So, I'm not saying that, they shouldn't be compensated for that, but.
Thinking about the question, that would be the reason why most buybacks are typically written like that. Where the purchase price that the city is selling it for is an undeveloped piece of property. We're going to have significant development on it by that point. You can't just. I think from Habitat's perspective, it would be unfair to them to just take an inflationary price of the purchase price when they've put so much investment into it. And the only way to fairly value that is an appraisal. They could theoretically do an appraisal with some discounting for the land value. But again, you'd have to ask Mr. Head if his investors would be willing to make that type of modification to the proposed agreement.
Because of the price we're selling it to is not an appraised price. It's so that was one question. The part about the lots, and let's see if I can find the section here. When under title commitments and insurance, it uses the term promptly after receipt of the survey and approval of the lot splits. Pursuant to section 1.4, the city will order from Chicago Title that basically the commitments for standard coverage owner's policy. So I guess promptly is my word is that pretty much standard? Because we're not sure exactly how long it could take to get that process going.
It is. So we've actually already have a title commitment. It is a title commitment for the overall property, not tied to the survey splitting it into 3 parts. All we have to do is update that title commitment, which is very easy to do once we have the survey. I'm not worried about that language. We have a very long time between that and closing, which is when we actually need the commitment. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, that's it for me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll try. My concerns, excuse me. I'll start out with saying I appreciate your efforts in trying to accommodate and get things adapted and changed and to try and meet council's concerns from the past few meetings. So I appreciate all the effort put into it, and I'm not going to try and nickel and dime through this thing with one word here, one word there. I think everybody's got their best efforts in front. Things that do concern me are minor modifications in the unit mix. What is the definition of minor? That concerns me. In section 4 and 4.5, government approvals, the second half of that paragraph, I think you got to be an algebra wizard to figure that out. So, the bottom line here, I think it has to go through Planning Commission. The city is in need of this housing and in need of a due care plan for the environmental, not necessarily cleanup. So as I look at it moving forward, it's hard to get 2 or 3 people to agree, and even harder to get 2 or 3 attorneys together in a room to agree. So I will say my biggest concern is the unit mix and how that changes during the Planning Commission. And it's going to be an interesting, if this body approves this, it's going to be an interesting process at Planning Commission. And my concern is the unit mix. If the Planning Commission works on the density and lowers density or approves a lesser density, what does the unit mix go to then? But I think it's a process that has to happen before. I think that's the next step. So.
Okay, well said. Anybody else? Going once, going twice, good? Okay. I'll just say, I feel like it's been a lot of work. We've been through the steps. I think the unit mix was a concern. I think we've addressed it. There's, I think, part of the point we're hearing some of the situations with the IRS and, rule changes, and Lord help us, they'll keep doing that. So hopefully they get that remedied and we're in a position where we can move ahead. So I will vote in favor. We have a motion, we have a second. Let's roll call this.
Arnold,
Yes.
Reeser,
Yes.
Schlack,
Yes.
Sleeper,
Yes.
Wilkins,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. It passes. Thank you very much. Next, City Council has to consider the approval of a payment in lieu of taxes ordinance and municipal services contract for the Overton Rental Phase 1. Just need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the pilot ordinance and municipal services contract for the Overton Rental Phase 1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Who wants to take this? Kate or Nick, or where are we at?
Thank you, council. So we have brought back the pilot ordinance and the municipal services agreement for the Overton Rental Phase 1. Nick has put this together here, and we've kind of addressed a couple things that I think we were talking about. I know that Mr. Sleeper had a question as to, can we pass this ordinance and then work on a resolution for any further rental phases and/or any other LIHTC programming? I think Nick will be addressing that. Also, we put this together to have the pilot ordinance, but they also have the municipal services that's coming right to the city, so that's not shared with all the other taxing jurisdictions. I should also state that as an apartment complex, this development would have to pay for their own garbage. So just like every other apartment complex around town, that will that would be 335 Center, and that would be Dockside. So those are the two that we know of. They have to pay for their own garbage. The condo associations that all pay individual taxes on their units, those have, those are part of, they get the municipal garbage removal. So just to kind of clear that out. And any other pilot ordinance, Nick, if you want to walk through that, as well as our municipal services agreement.
Sure. So in terms of the question that Kate raised at the beginning of her kind of intro there, the first couple sections of this agreement of this ordinance are generally worded provisions. The article itself that it creates is generally worded as service charge in lieu of taxes for qualifying housing developments. So we have sections 22-141 through 22-144 that would apply to any future MSHDA LIHTC project, including Overton Rental Phase 2. And then section 22-145 is specific to Overton Rental Phase 1. So the first part sets out a general framework for definitions and things like that. The only part of this that's specific to Overton Rental Phase 1 is section 22-145. This ordinance was introduced in the September meeting in conjunction with the original draft of the agreement. It's basically the same as it was as presented there, except that we have lowered the amount of the pilot from 3% to 2%, and then have additionally added a municipal services agreement to be approved at the same time. This was based on a discussion at the September meeting where it was suggested that we should do a municipal service agreement. The benefit of the municipal service agreement is that the revenue generated from that agreement is not shared with other taxing jurisdictions. It's specific to the city and specifically for the purpose of recouping city expenses, namely police services. So you'd have 1% of Habitat's net rents going just to the city, the other 2% being collected as taxes normally are and then distributed to the taxing jurisdictions in proportion with the amount of their millages. And we have a fairly standard municipal services contract that follows this item. We are asking for two separate motions on those, but they're all under the same item in the agenda. And again, this has been, it's based on a model that's commonly used, I believe was provided by Mr. Kilpatrick, but it's similar to what's used on other MSHDA agreements throughout the state, and has terms that were negotiated and approved by Habitat's representatives. So with that, I'll take any further questions.
Council, would you prefer now, or would you like to hear from the public first?
Well, do I need to amend my motion then to actually have two separate motions, one for the?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you had already made the motion. If it's already made for one, I don't have any objection to a single vote.
They're both in there, so go one.
Okay.
You could do that. You can
Let's
amend
go.
it to include the municipal services, but we can get forward, we can get started.
Let's go with one.
Nick's okay with one, I'm good with one.
Yes.
Go. Public comments first? Public questions or comments on the pilot? Just come up, state your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Mary Hasley, 726 North Shore Drive. I think the pilot ordinance is premature here. The amendments, I think, should warrant a second reading. As Attorney Curcicchio had mentioned to Habitat's attorney, that if there's amendments, it may warrant a second reading, and I think that's warranted in this case. Also, before any vote is on the pilot, I would like to know what has South Haven approved for pilot ordinances for other LIHTC establishments, complexes here, Maple Glen, Briar Hill. As was explained in a previous city council meeting, the Habitat is who proposed the 3% total. And as I already alluded to, another developer actually proposed a 4% and was willing to pay twice as much money for the land. And the city said that they were gathering data to find out what the history was, what the precedent was for pilots in South Haven. So before any vote is taken, I would like to know what is already being paid and why such an apparent low 3% is allowed. And I just reiterate my disappointment that there wasn't an amendment to allow some discretionary for pilot 2, but rental phase 2, but that pilot ordinance will come in the future, but the agreement has limited us to 3% at the expense of the taxpayers having to carry the load.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to mention do you have any info on the pilot?
Sure. We were unable to find a pilot for Briar Hills. We don't have one for Maple Glen. The only thing that we do have is we have a longstanding practice with the Housing Commission. They do pay, I think, 10%, but I don't believe, I'm not sure what exactly everything they have, but we don't have an ordinance on file that we can find. Now, the Housing Commission was those different buildings were built many, many years ago. So far in our research, we have not been able to find an ordinance where we have adopted a LIHTC or a pilot for the HUD properties, specifically the Housing Commission. But each year we affirm their payment in lieu of tax in the amount that the federal government has agreed to.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Any other public questions on this one? All right, seeing none. Council questions? Pretty straight ahead? Pretty straight ahead? All right. We've got a motion, a second, to approve the pilot ordinance and municipal services contract for Overton Rental Phase 1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's approved. Very good. Thank you. Let's see, new business. City Council will be asked to consider a proposal from Berkshire Hathaway, Michigan Real Estate, to purchase the former Michigan State Police Building and surrounding property and direct staff and the city attorney to prepare a proposed purchase agreement. I'm trying to decide if we want to discuss this for a minute first. Maybe Kate, you want to we'll go a little bit out of order here. You want to just explain what we're talking about? We'll air out any questions, then we'll see what we come up with.
Absolutely. So the city has owned the Michigan State Police Post and the lots around it for some time. And we used that building while to relocate our police department while our police department building was going through a substantial renovation. After we were completed using that as a temporary facility, the city was holding on to it, and then we found a tenant at that time. So we have had a tenant in that building, I want to say, since 2018. The tenant is a law office, and I think there's a subtenant in there. So we have been a property owner, a landlord for some time, and the building is quite old. If you've ever been in there, it was definitely built to be a fortress. It is a cinder block building, so there is a lot of unique attributes to that building that you wouldn't find in any other building. I'm sure you wouldn't find a gun locker or a jail cells and such like that. So it's a very unique building. The other thing is that there is, it's been a little run down because it has not been always been, it's as we've been using it. And then, of course, we've been we've had a tenant in there for some time. It is just showing its age. And we know that there's some issues with the building with HVAC issues. There's some ceiling, or I'm sorry, some roof issues. So we know that there's some issues on the property as we are the landlord. We put an ad in the newspaper, and it ran for 2 weeks, seeking proposals to sell this property. And because I think it's better for this to be fully in the hands of an owner that wants to redevelop that property and bring it up to, standards that a landlord cannot. And so that's what we were looking to do, is kind of get out of the landlord business and get this property sold so it can be either redeveloped, but the city is not being a landlord.
Okay. Do you want to discuss just the appraisal versus the offer, and just because that question had come up, just to kind of, let's get that out there and then.
Sure. We had an appraisal done that did come back kind of high from what we were thinking. But it does say, I think I have it in here, is over $300,000. Now, I did share that with a number of people who looked at it, and they were concerned about that the comps that were used were not using commercial property here in South Haven. As someone else had noted, that there was a building built, or I'm sorry, there was a building just across the street that was recently purchased and it is being renovated, but that was not used as one of the comps. So they were using comps, I want to say, in Grand Rapids, Holland,
yeah.
and some larger metropolitan areas. Here, they did not use comps that were around the area, but this is the appraiser that we're working with. We also did not ask them what was the value of vacant land, because it does have a structure on it. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a cinder block building that has, if any kind of internal renovations are going to happen, it's going to be kind of costly, because removing cinder blocks is time consuming, and it's kind of rough. But we also know that there's an exterior of the building, and then there would be some ADA accessibility, things that would have to be done. The parking lot would have to be redone. I believe at some point there was a gas pump on site for the Michigan State Police. They had their own gas tanks. I believe the tanks have been removed. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not too well versed in the property. But anyway, there is a brownfield plan. And if not with the city, there is a county one. There is petroleum dollars through an EPA grant. So there is some redevelopment possibilities here through either brownfield and or commercial rehab, because this is in that district.
Okay. Yeah, when I saw the appraisal price, I was kind of shocked. And then I looked through the comps and I quickly understood they were shopping in another town, but.
That's correct. And I think that maybe kind of addresses why there's such a disparity between the offer as well as where the comps are. I'm not seeing too many commercial properties that are going for that high. Many people are looking around for commercial, but you also have to realize that we're coming right out of the pandemic. A lot of commercial spaces were not being filled because office workers and other people, they're not sure if they were going to come back and have an office space, because people were assuming they might work from home indefinitely. So the idea was, why have so much office space if you're not going to have those folks being there? Now, we're kind of getting away from that as things are starting to normalize, but we're also seeing that there's still commercial property that's sitting on the market that has not moved. So.
Yeah, and we have quite a bit along that corridor. It is definitely in need of cleanup. We've got the old Family Video store, you've got the old Papa John's Pizza. I mean, there's a lot empty, so.
That's
okay.
correct.
Questions?
Sure, what's a 50 by 100 lot going for in the city of South Haven?
Depends on its use and depending on where it's at. I would say a residential lot's going to go for a lot more, but that's depending on your location. And I'm going to guess if you're west of Broadway, it's going to go for a lot more. Commercial lots for that low, a lot of it depends on what they're looking to build there. Here, we have an established building that the offer before you would like to not only renovate the interior quite extensively, but they're talking about a very aggressive exterior renovation, painting it, new awnings possibly, a new approach, making sure that it's has really good curb appeal, new landscaping, and a monument sign. They're also proposing a pocket park in like that pie wedged area to kind of dress it up. As you know, if you're along that corridor, there really is no park space there. We do have a couple empty lots that were sold in a foreclosure through a tax sale on the other side of the street there, but really there's been no development on that side of town, on that side of Phillip Street. But we're seeing there that there's a lot of exterior renovations that would really dress it up and, as you say, add to this corridor improvement. We had also prepared what this site would look like if that building were demolished. And there would be, setbacks because that's in an overlay zone, and the lots actually go kind of deep. But to my knowledge, that no one's actually asked to demolish that area, demolish that building.
Well, the other two lots could be sold separately.
Yes, they could.
Immediately, correct?
They could.
Would
They
have
could. I
nothing
think.
to do with the building, correct?
Well, one of them has, I think, a small, pole barn or
Correct.
barn of some sort on there, which there are zoning complications with that because you can't have an accessory structure without a primary structure. but we would be making a nonconformity. But that happens and things you have to work around. So would that have to be demolished? Would they have to convert that? I'm not entirely sure. But the offer right now is for all of the lots right there. And if council would like to see something different, please give us some terms to work with.
So I think your question would be, could you, I mean, basically what's, the building sits on what we're seeing is 4 and 5, with 2 and 3 being,
Well, there's 3 lots plus where she's talking about the last B part, triangle part, that which we just acquired or something recently.
The triangle part was always part of it. We were unable to combine them because of Van Buren County doesn't like to mix plats up. So 35, if you're looking at Exhibit B on page 132, 35 is that pie-shaped portion. Lots 4 and 5 are where the building is located. Lots 2 and 3 are, I think we went through the combination process, so we combined those 2 lots. And so there's a pretty substantial parking lot back there, plus a large building where MSP used to use that as storage for various equipment.
yeah, so right now 2 and 3 is a parking lot.
One thing I would note is that the notice that ran in the paper mentioned the possibility of buying one or more of the lots, and that this offer was for all of the lots. So developers could have submitted offers for only 1 or 2 of the lots and chose to do this instead.
Can you explain what's the item number, what's shown in 1, where it says block?
Oh, what's back there?
Yeah, it just shows what, I mean, it looks as though it's a piece of this, but
That's another piece of property. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not.
Right,
it's
just to
part of
clarify,
this.
that's not this, because if you look at it, it looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Just.
Yeah.
So 2 and 3 is a parking lot.
Yes.
4 and 5 sits the building.
3 has a pole barn on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it actually sits maybe adjacent on both 2 and 3 in parts.
All right, other questions? Anybody? Anybody else? No other questions? Okay. Is there a motion? So basically, we'll be looking for a motion to accept the proposal from Berkshire Hathaway to purchase the former Michigan State Police Post.
Make a motion to accept the proposal to purchase the property of the former state police post and direct staff and city attorney to prepare a proposed purchase agreement.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion. We have a second. Public questions or comments? Nothing? Other council comments? Nothing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. It's approved. We're going to now receive an update from our police chief, Natalie Thompson. Thanks for hanging out for 3 hours with us tonight. You brought backup with you. We always appreciate when you have backup with you.
Keeping each other awake.
That's why they hitting each other back there.
Thank you. I just would like to talk a little bit more about our upcoming narcotics millage and a little bit more of how important that is for our police department.
Natalie, grab your mic. Mic.
Yeah. Is that better? Okay. The South Haven Police Department continues to counter illegal narcotics activity by working with both the Michigan State Police Southwest Enforcement Team, whom you heard an update from a little bit earlier, and also the Van Buren County Narcotics Team, which hopefully at the next city council meeting, I'm going to contact that lieutenant to give an update about what that team does also. Our 2 officers assigned to these teams, 1 to each, are funded through a controlled substances enforcement millage that comes up for renewal every 5 years. The current millage is up for renewal this November 2021. The millage specifies to fund activities to enforce laws in the city of South Haven which prohibit or control manufacture, sale, delivery, and use of controlled substances as defined by applicable state laws, rules, and regulations. This millage funds 2 full-time police officers for the department. If the millage does not pass, the department will lose 2 full-time officers, reducing our full staff from 20 police officers to 18. And that means we will not have 2 officers assigned to those teams. For these assignments to narcotics, officers submit a letter of interest to be considered prior to selection. Assignments to narcotics are from 3 to 5 years. Their duties include undercover buys, surveillance, execution of various types of search warrants, working closely with federal law enforcement officers and teams, and other types of covert operations necessary to facilitate successful cases. So for almost 2 years now, we have partnered with both teams. We have one detective with the Southwest Enforcement Team and one with the Van Buren County Narcotics Team. The Southwest Enforcement Team has great resources available to target statewide, and as you heard earlier, even international drug traffickers with ties to our community. The Van Buren County team utilizes local resources to target lower-level dealers, which makes a more expedient impact, but also lends to providing information to expand cases beyond. And it is common for them to pass up information, to the state police team. Partnerships with both of these teams has positively benefited our community, and as I have said earlier, I think in another meeting, they've really lent to producing great evidence and prosecutions of individuals involved in other types of crimes, from retail fraud, larcenies, to shootings, and even homicide. And I could repeat what departments are comprised of SWAT, but I think the lieutenant and sergeant did that earlier. So I just wanted to end with a recent case that gives an example as to how important working on narcotics cases is for our community. This exemplifies importance of supporting narcotics. This case in particular, it was over a year of investigation. The narcotics detectives were able to successfully attain a federal indictment on an individual from our area who was selling methamphetamine and heroin from houses in South Haven, one in Covert, and one in Pullman. This individual maintained a mobile narcotics delivery service in our area. The suspect was also involved in several dozen threats, complaints, and at least one delivery of heroin causing death. So this case in particular was initiated from information gained by a South Haven police officer during a traffic stop, and that's where it went. This investigation is ongoing, and with a lot of these, I can't give names when they're still ongoing, but that is why this is so important. So that is what I have for tonight.
Agreed. It was a good presentation earlier, by the way. And I will admit, I think we kind of forget in our daily lives that this activity occurs. I read about it in the news, and I think every TV show has it, but I must admit, in my daily life, I don't see it, but I'm glad you're out taking care of it.
Thank you. And I think Lieutenant Blanksford said it well. I live here too, and until you're actually in a unit like that, it really is eye-opening, and you're like, wow, this is a big deal. So I like how he explained that, and it is true.
Yeah, these are bad people. It's good to remove them from our streets.
Yes.
Anybody else? Comments for the chief? Thank you for keeping us safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for staying for the last 3 hours with us tonight,
Thanks for staying.
as well as Sergeant Hathaway. All right, very well. Let's do citizens in the audience, maybe heard on items not on the agenda. So if anybody would like to come up and discuss anything we have not already discussed, come on up. You'll have up to 5 minutes. We're down to 3. Nobody, no takers. Gone. City manager comments. Kate?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I do want to just kind of give one last shout out to Ron Dotson. His last day will be Thursday. We had a very nice retirement party for him at the DPW last Wednesday, and had lots of folks show up for that. Again, just highlighting his 43 years of service with the city. We do want to just thank Ron for all of his years of service. We thank his wife Kathy for all those nights when Ron was maybe out working, and just want to congratulate him and wish him well in his retirement. I'd also, if you were on the DPW Nixle alerts, you probably would have got some information today that that the SHWASA will be stopping permits to do water services in the fall. I'm sorry, in the winter. And so what this is that this happens every year. Asphalt companies stop producing asphalt components here shortly, and this is the time of year that actually Van Buren County Road Commission and Algon County Road Commission stopped giving out permits for right-of-way permits for people to kind of break up the concrete or the cement or the asphalt to go and work in the right-of-way. And that's because, well, you don't always have the asphalt to go and put that back, and nobody wants to be driving on gravel for the rest of the year. So we do know that emergencies happen. If emergencies do happen, please still do contact Public Works and getting a hold of someone there. But really, this is just letting folks know that we're coming into that time of year where working in the right-of-way is restricted because of environmental factors, as well as the fact that asphalt companies are kind of shut down. So the ability to go back and patch those after they're done is kind of diminished. So that's kind of that. We're also kind of coming into that time of year where shutoffs are, SHWASA or the BPU no longer does those. It's just that again is an operation of law. This is something that happens in Michigan. I think the cutoff date is somewhere in either past October 15th or November 15th. I think it's November 15th. But we go to them until I think March when shutoffs could go back on. So that's the 6 months of the year where shutoffs don't occur by state law. So those are my comments tonight. Oh, one final thing. Trick or Treat will be Saturday the 30th. There's a number of updates that are going on. There's a number of events that are going on, including a trunk or treat that's out at LMC on the 29th. There's a full listing of the different events on the city manager's blog. So if you haven't watched that or read that, you can find those activities there. Those are my comments.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions for our city manager? Nothing. City council comments. I will start on my right. Mr. Reeser, good evening.
Since Natalie was the last one to speak, I wanted to comment about something I found out today about one of your officers. There is an elderly woman living right off Monroe or on Monroe Boulevard who last year was robbed of some jewelry. She's 90, lives alone, and thanks to the kindness and diligence of the officer, they caught the person. But she was so thrilled how she was treated. Just recently, I guess she's had a problem with her garage door being unlocked and maybe someone broke in. But the same officer showed up, not only closed the garage door, but showed her how to lock it, locked it for her, and she was thrilled. And I can only imagine how good she felt at 90 years old living alone, knowing that the police are taking that much a hands-on approach to this residence. It was really nice, Natalie. And I'm sorry, I don't know which officer it was. I'd like to thank all the presenters tonight. I thought they did a great job, and I loved it because I felt they were outsiders trying to give facts so we could all learn. Most important, equally important, the residents could hear what they perceived to be the facts and giving information. I thought it was really helpful. I would like, after people move into Overton, after they've been there 6 months, I hope some of them come in here and give us their comments about the property. I told everyone I've lived in a street that had 30 or 40 houses on each side of the street and no ground between them, and we love the neighborhood. I'd like to know what people think, not what we think now, but what they think after they live in there about the parking and about the density. The last thing I have thought tonight, whether I want to mention it, but I just can't let this go. It was upsetting City Council last time, some of the comments made. I don't mind, even though it's hard, for some of the residents to come up and hit us with issue after issue after issue about Overton. Fair game. We're on city council because we volunteered to do a job, and we do this because we are residents and we want to help this community. We all know last time there was some comments made that were a bit insulting. But I got to tell you, this afternoon, Kate called me, and I hadn't even read it yet, but I got an email that at best was inaccurate and at worst was absolutely insulting. It's just uncalled for. We should stick to Overton and not try to go after people, especially when you don't have the facts right. And the worst example, excluding me, was Pastor Wilkins, Letitia's husband, last week, when a resident talked about him, and it wasn't even the right person. And then the letter ended up talking about his ability as a pastor. I will end on a bright note about residents. A week ago, I got the most beautiful email. But an hour before city council, after Kate called me, after I looked at that horrible email, I got an email that literally, it's hard for me to talk about it. It was so kind, such a beautiful email, thanking myself, and I'm sure it represents all of us, what we're trying to do. So at times, this job can be wonderful. Please, I hope everyone listening knows that we're trying our best to do what's best for the community, whether you agree with every decision or not. We are trying to do the best. And I don't have any problem with residents disagreeing with us as long as it's not insults that aren't even based on facts. That's a tough one to absorb. Thanks for hearing me out.
Good comments. Thank you. George.
I also want to agree with Councilmember Reeser on the presentations we had today. I want to especially thank staff for bringing those experts in. And I've realized now how complicated it can be to do this kind of development. And there's no way I feel that we could have done this without the help of experts. And, you know, it's worth spending 3 hours in a city council meeting if I learn something, so that's good. After we're making progress toward Overton, I think it's going to really come down to the Planning Commission. And one thing I was reading about is some of the guidelines for planned unit development. And this kind of gets to, in my mind, to the density. And it talks about for a PUD to basically deviate from the zoning guidelines, you have to ensure there are recognizable and substantial benefits to the community achieved by the PUD, and these benefits must otherwise be unfeasible or unlikely to be achieved by development under normal zoning requirements, taking into consideration the reasonably foreseeable detriments of the proposed development and use, including and without limitation. It goes through a few limitations, but it says to me that we're not going to deviate from the zoning requirements unless there's substantial and recognizable benefits to the community. And I know, being on the Planning Commission, that's one of the things I'm going to look for before we approve any PUD and send it to City Council. And that's all I got to say.
Good comments. Thank you.
I also want to, for the third time, thank everyone that presented tonight. It was great information. And then my other comment is former city council member and former Mayor Pro Tem reminded me over the weekend that the golf cart season has ended for the year. So I would like to share that with the public also, that you're not supposed to have your golf carts out anymore, not till spring. That's my only comment.
Mr. Schlock.
No comment.
Oh, good man.
No comment.
All right, I'll go quick. If you read in the newspaper, there was a very nice article. It just mentioned South Haven Medal of Honor recipient, Dwayne Dewey, who passed away, was 89. And so it mentions, it was kind of a good little historical article, but they mentioned three names, Wilcox, and then who was, I believe, Civil War. I would see Jim McLuhan, who still runs around and represents us well. So You also, whether or not you've been out behind Three Blondes, there's a little Dewey Lane is right out there. LB, I think LB and Son sits on that property. So that was named in honor of Dwayne Dewey. There's your trivia for the day. I believe you can verify this. Choir concert tomorrow night?
Correct.
7 p.m.?
Yep.
I asked my lovely wife, I said, I don't have kids in school anymore. What's going on? I should tell the public what's going on. Choir concert, 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Listiac, go. Sydney Barnes got South Haven High School athlete, got 4th in the state for golf.
Yep.
Good stuff. So I will ditto the comments. Very nice presentations. Thank you, staff. Thank you, public, for your comments. This is a process. This is the beginning, but we will get something done. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Boom.
Shot at 80 and an 84.